Welcome to Stockholm and to the Swedish Parliament, the Riksdag. During the Swedish EU presidency between January and June 2023, the Riksdag is an arena for meetings and dialogue between MPs from the parliaments of the EU member states and the European Parliament. Last year, we celebrated 100 years of Swedish democracy. This year, we're commemorating 500 years of parliamentary work and decision-making. The Riksdag is an open parliament in central Stockholm. Welcome to the Riksdag.
Bienvenue à Stockholm et au Parlement suédois. Pendant la présidence suédoise du Conseil de l'UE de janvier à juin, le Riksdag, le Parlement suédois, est le lieu de rencontre et de dialogue entre les membres des parlements des pays de l'UE et le Parlement européen. L'année dernière, la démocratie suédoise a fêté ses 100 ans. Cette année marque 500 ans de travail et de prise de décision au Riksdag. Le Riksdag est un parlement ouvert, situé au cœur de Stockholm. Bienvenue au Riksdag.
Welcome to Stockholm and to the Swedish Parliament, the Riksdag. During the Swedish EU presidency between January and June 2023, the Riksdag is an arena for meetings and dialogue between MPs from the parliaments of the EU member states and the European Parliament. Last year, we celebrated 100 years of Swedish democracy. This year, we're commemorating 500 years of parliamentary work and decision-making. The Riksdag is an open parliament in central Stockholm. Welcome to the Riksdag.
Bienvenue à Stockholm et au Parlement suédois. Pendant la présidence suédoise du Conseil de l'UE de janvier à juin, le Riksdag, le Parlement suédois, est le lieu de rencontre et de dialogue entre les membres des parlements des pays de l'UE et le Parlement européen. L'année dernière, la démocratie suédoise a fêté ses 100 ans. Cette année marque 500 ans de travail et de prise de décision au Riksdag. Le Riksdag est un parlement ouvert, situé au cœur de Stockholm. Bienvenue au Riksdag.
Good morning, friends and colleagues. I hope you enjoyed last night's venue at the Vasa Museum, and I hope that you are ready for today's conference and fruitful discussions. I think I will start in my native language, Swedish. So, god morgon.
Good morning, dear colleagues, and welcome. Welcome to the Riksdag, to the Swedish Parliament, and welcome to our plenary chamber. Today, we will be meeting in the presence of Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Victoria. And for that reason, I would ask you to please all stand. Please stand. All rise.
Hennes Kungliga.
Your Royal Highness, Mr. Speaker, dear colleagues, today we will be discussing the very important green transition for jobs and for prosperity, and of course we shall be speaking about Ukraine, reconstruction and support for Ukraine. I would suggest we move on straight away to session 3, towards a green transition. We have 3 speakers. Mrs. Helene Fritzon, who is a member of the European Parliament, and in particular a member of the Environment Committee of the European Parliament. We also have Mr. Daniel Mess with us, who is member of the Cabinet of Mr. Timmermans, and we have Johan Kulenstierna, who is Director General of Formas. And after we've heard the last keynote speaker, I shall open the debate, open the floor, but you can already now press request the floor in order to be registered on the speakers list if you so wish. Allow me now to call the first keynote speaker, Helene Fritzon, who's going to speak to us about the green transition. Helene.
Fru ordförande. Thank you, Madam Chair. Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Victoria, Mr. Speaker, members, colleagues. I wish you a warmly welcome to Sweden during our beautiful springtime. It is an honor and a joy to stand here before you in the Swedish Parliament, the Riksdag, and talk to you about the most important matter of all in our times, the green transition. To cite our much-loved Swedish singer-songwriter Ted Gärdestad, how will our children's world look when the good life comes to an end? Can we drag our ploughs and harrows through the earth time and again? All the children's dreams fit in their little rooms. The universe is contained in a box, only 14 inches across. This really is what our climate and environmental crisis centers on, about the limits of our only planet and what type of world we will be leaving for our children and grandchildren. Sweden and the Social Democrats have pioneered climate and environmental policy for some time now. Already in 1972, Olof Palme invited people to the first UN Environmental Conference in Stockholm to discuss environmental issues. In the 70s, a Swedish state carried out comprehensive investment in district heating to reduce our oil dependence. We managed to reduce our country's emissions by nearly half in just over a decade, while at the same time being the most equal country in the world. In the 90s, Göran Persson launched the idea of the green Swedish welfare state, founded in the idea of a just transition where everybody should be participating to create a better and more sustainable society. Our much missed colleague Anna Lindh was Minister for the Environment and later Foreign Minister. And she took the lead in the EU right from the outset and was a driving force behind the acidification strategy and stricter chemicals legislation. As a member of the European Parliament today, I see clear legacies of Swedish social democratic policy in the EU flagship project, the Green Deal. The Green Deal was launched in 2019 at the start of a current term of office. The idea and ambition was to take a comprehensive approach to the climate transition, but also environmental matters more broadly, creating a toxin-free environment, ensuring biological diversity, food production, and social justice. Because in reality, they cannot be separated, and that is why our policy for this transition must be comprehensive. The basis of the Green Deal is the historic climate legislation that the EU decided on in 2021. Again, we took a leading role because we have clear climate legislation with clear targets that states that the EU should be climate neutral by 2050 at the latest, and we must reduce our emissions by at least 55% by the year 2030. In order to reach our climate targets for 2030, we've negotiated the reform package Fit for 55, which consists of a number of reforms and new tools to reduce emissions and promote a just transition to strengthen Europe's competitiveness. The Green Deal and Fit for 55 means that the EU really has taken the lead globally for a green transition. This climate legislation and Fit for 55 is, as always within the European Union, a political compromise. We know that in order to keep an even step with the Paris Agreement and science, the EU needs to continue to raise the ambition level on its climate targets and ambitions, and I will continue to work towards this in the European Parliament. The EU is taking decisive steps forward now in an unprecedented way. We're starting to see real action when it comes to this transition. It is now up to member states to deliver on what has been agreed at the EU level. As part of the Fit for 55 package, we have tightened up EU's emissions trading so that the price of emissions will increase markedly from 2024. We've raised the level of ambition for all countries to reduce emissions by 2030, and we have raised our targets to store more carbon in our forests and soils. We will also be launching a social climate fund to lend support to households and small businesses in the transition. At the same time, climate levies will be introduced at the EU level so that the price of emissions for goods coming from outside of Europe is the same as for goods from within Europe. This means that we are harnessing the EU's joint forces and its single market to pressure the rest of the world to act and to reconsider. Sweden, not least, has to bear an even greater responsibility, although we were at the forefront of this transition, because we have the right economic preconditions. That is the very strength of the EU's cooperation. Together, we can shoulder this transition according to our accountability and our ability to act. And in spite of historic challenges and a war in our neighbourhood, which has driven up the prices of energy, we can continue this transition. The negotiations about all the legislative aspects of Fit for 55 are concluding. This means that we are now passing the baton to member states. Policy must now become reality on the national and local levels. It is your parliaments and committees that need to draft climate and environmental policies now. And climate investments need to be carried out in municipalities and provinces. I was a member of a local municipality for many years, and I know that the real action happens in cooperation between local business and municipalities. I have a few key aspects I really want to stress here. First of all, start the work now. 2030 is only 7 years away, and we must see a downward trend in emissions over the coming years. Waiting to carry out the transition will lead to increased costs and worsen competitiveness. The reforms of the emissions trade system and the increased levels of ambitions mean that those who take the lead will have the best possible preconditions. Second, gender equality and the green transition must go hand in hand, or this will not be sustainable. Women are taking a disproportionate responsibility for this transition in their daily lives, but they are also more affected by crises. Public transport is a good example of this. It is used to a greater extent by women, and women actually have a more sustainable diet. However, 75% of the new green jobs globally by 2030 are expected to go to men. There is room to act here. Europe has a huge potential to meet the increased need for skilled labour and to drive the transition in the right direction. We can ensure that the transition will be one that gives women greater power and participation. Third, in order to make a transition successful, it will be key to make it a more just and democratic transition for Europe, where all citizens actually clearly feel that their lives improve. This will require redistributive reform and support both for households and businesses. All member states will be tasked to present plans for the reforms to be carried out using financing from the Social Climate Fund. I call on you to start drafting your policy in this area now. As a social democrat, it is a given for me that we need strong trade union and political cooperation as a key to this just transition and to garner support for the very contents of the transition through policy. We all bear a big responsibility here in this important work, but we will take it on together as a united Europe, where we are able to face crises by dialing up our democracy, our freedom, and our sustainability. That, my friends, is something we are doing for our children and for our grandchildren. Thank you.
Tack, Helene Fritzon.
Thank you very much, Helene Fritzon. What an interesting contribution. And now I call the second keynote speaker, Mr. Daniel Mess from the Private Office of Vice President Timmermans, European Commission. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness, Crown Princess Victoria, Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members of Parliament, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you on behalf of the European Commission, first of all, for beautiful Stockholm, for hosting us today. I already got some pre-energy when I saw the title of this session, because the key word in that title is for me transition. How do we achieve a transition, a good transition, to a climate-neutral future? Because I think that all of us agree here that we need to build that future. And we learn from many aspects in our life that actually transitions really matter to get to good results. Ms. Fritzon already started with some inspiration from songs. Indeed, the Czech-Austrian composer Gustav Mahler also said, if you build the secret of a beautiful music piece is in the transition in its rhythms. And in sports, Usain Bolt said, what builds a champion, a sports champion that achieves results, is working on your transition and your technique. And closer to here in business and in science, journalist Robbie Schell said, if you have big global transitions, big challenges, that actually brings the best out of us as humanity, namely to make new discoveries in science and innovation to master the change. Now you're thinking, why is he saying all of this? And I'm saying all of this because transitions are really essential as well for achieving the European Green Deal and our climate action. There will be no transition, there will be no change, there will be no results in terms of building a climate neutral future if we don't allow citizens to transition with it. And that is also easily said than done, because there is unfortunately a difference between change and transition. Change is something that comes from the outside, climate change. Transition is something that needs to come from the inside, us as human beings, in our mindset, adapting us to make sure that we can transition. And that's tough. Also when you talk about building a climate neutral future. Australian philosopher, Roman Krajcik, sketched out a dilemma here, just for basic human psychology. He said, we all want to be good ancestors, and I think that everybody feels that. We all want to be good ancestors and leave a world behind for our kids and those who come after them, a world that is at least as good as the one today. But Krajcik also said, yeah, the dilemma is that it's very difficult for humans, just the human brain, to focus purely on the long term. To focus purely on the long term, because there are also so many things that you can worry about and should worry about in the short term. This is basically, can you think about the potential end of a planet when you also struggle to meet the end of the month with your bills? And it's perfectly human to have that. It's our human psychology. So how do you come out of that dilemma when you have a big challenge like this green transition? My humble suggestion is today to perhaps see if we can turn the thinking of Mr. Krajcik around, to see if we can cause long-term change, a long-term transition that is to a sustainable future by having short-term successes. By showing short-term successes, companies bringing affordable, clean products to our citizens, perhaps we can then make them feel more comfortable for the long-term change that is needed. So that is actually my main message today, how we can achieve short-term successes to make sure that people can trust that we do what is right in the long term. And three things could be relevant for that. The importance of targets to trigger a transition, the limits of targets without a realistic plan to achieve them, and giving a voice to everyone who is struggling or facing obstacles in making that transition. Now, first on the importance of targets, Ms. Fritzon already mentioned it before me. The direction of the European continent is set in the European climate law, which actually creates a legally binding obligation for the continent, member states, to reach climate neutrality together, collectively, by 2050. As Ms. Fritzon also mentioned, we now have also laws in place, the Fit for 55 climate package, which actually really sketch out the future in areas of our daily lives. By 2030, minus 55% less greenhouse gas emissions. How do we then achieve that with more renewable heating in our homes, a gradual switch to zero-emission cars, and circular use of materials? And actually, the continent is actually a pioneer in that, because we are the first continent in the world that is not only defining targets, but also having laws in place to get there. But as I said, targets really do have limits. When we adopted the climate package last month, and we also celebrated that, I said, yeah, we're not going to wake up next morning thinking that the work is done with these targets. We're actually going to wake up next morning and realize that the work is only starting, the work to implement those targets. And members of parliament who are closer to European citizens than many of us in Brussels know how tough that is to start implementing this, and difficult choices must be made, and we really have to be honest about that. As Ms. Fritzon said, in Europe, it's indeed a machine of compromise. Europe, we struck a deal that is about having climate reforms and climate investments across Europe, from north to south, from west to east, but then indeed also social climate funds to help households who are too vulnerable to make the decision on their own. Now, that is, of course, important if you want to implement what you've agreed to. But I want to touch upon today and focus really on another angle, which I believe is also really important to state, and that is the business angle to this green transition. And I would like to mention two examples that you may think from the first sight don't relate to each other, but there is a red thread. One comes from my personal sphere. My parents live in a social housing project. And we always thought that in making the green transition to cleaner a car or a more energy efficient home, they always thought that I and my family would go first, because you're more wealthy, so you're wealthier than us, you will go first. And actually it's not the case, because my parents moved into a new social housing project. It came with solar panels on the roofs, cabling in the garages for cars. And now my father called me last week and said, like, I'm looking for an affordable second-hand electric car. Do you have any tips for me? So he will make the transition before me. And that is really quite surprising given where we started. And the other example is a bit of a bigger one where we all saw the announcement last week of, in France in this case, of a major new battery plant in Dunkirk to make the new generation of storage batteries for cars, bringing 20,000 jobs to that region. And the red thread between these two stories, because they seem unrelated but they are related, the red thread to me is network of businesses. Value chains of SMEs and other companies that can work together to bring us these solutions, because my parents would not have had the solar panels on their roofs or the cabling in the garages without SMEs, small businesses, small entrepreneurs who are able to install these panels and install the cabling. And the big investment decision in France, when a journalist asked, why did you choose Europe? The first answer was Europe is stable and has a long-term commitment to climate neutral future. But the second answer was Europe has a network of smaller businesses that we can work with, that are committed to this too. So the red thread to this all is really this value chain of companies that can bring these affordable solutions to our citizens. And we need those businesses here in Europe. The BlackRock founder, Larry Fink, so that's the richest company I think officially in the world, he said the next 1,000 unicorns, so those smaller companies who get a big valuation, will be companies in climate technology. So this is a path of leadership that we cannot afford to miss as a continent. So what we really need now that we have a Green Deal with targets in place, we really need a business plan as well to make these targets happen. And we're starting serious thinking in the European Union on exactly that, looking at what businesses need to do that with us on the continent. This is big things, making sure that they have access to affordable clean energy, critical raw materials, that we pool public and private investments, but also things that are more mundane, just making it easier to do green business in Europe, quicker permitting, and also having an honest discussion when bureaucratic rules get in the way. Also bureaucratic rules that can come from Europe. And Ms. Fritzon also already said, Sweden and the country I know best, the Netherlands, are countries where the economic foundations are pretty strong to do this. That's not the case across our continent. So we also need to make sure how we can pool the power of our businesses to also bring this to other parts of our continent and also exceeding countries who are also present here and also face that challenge. Now, you as members of national parliament, you know far better than me that no transition will work if citizens don't feel visible in obstacles that they face, if they don't get the feeling that they're heard, that they're seen and that they're understood. But this also happens on the business side. Last week I traveled with my executive vice president Frans Timmermans to Rotterdam, and we visited a company called Betterlyzer. And Betterlyzer is making electrolyzers, which is the equipment that we need to separate oxygen, to have water and separate the oxygen from the hydrogen. And what they do is they have an electrolyzer that can also at the same time store the energy produced. So save it for when it's really needed, hence the name Betterlyzer, because it's electrolyzer and battery into one. Now that is an SME. And anybody working on the clean energy decision will know what I mean when I say how often you get the question, how are we going to do this? The wind is not blowing every day. The sun is not shining every hour of the day. And that's the major European and global challenge. And here we have an SME who can have a major part of the answer to that challenge, namely producing the energy and storing it at the same time. But the eye-opener for me was that that SME never had access to decision makers in Europe. So they had a big part of the answer and never had access to us. And that is really a challenge that we need to start also discussing, in my humble view. I know that Sweden and Scandinavia are also in this way often leading the way. You see very promising accelerators, so basically network of companies that help also SMEs to connect with bigger businesses that are interested in their solutions, to have common test centers to test that solution, really practical things. And my plea also today is that can we think across Europe how we can learn from that Scandinavian experience and how we can give SMEs a stronger voice in Europe. And I understood that I'm actually giving here an answer to, I was not present yesterday, but there was a quiz on the single market, and I believe that 90% of the businesses present exactly asked for that, access to Europe early on. So I hope that we can all work together to connect those SMEs better to us. So in conclusion, this should also go, by the way, for men and women, female entrepreneurs as well. I'm a dad to 3 girls, so I'm really personally attached to that, because any transition is easier if you believe in yourself and your talent and all your talent in your society, male and female. And to start believing, we need short-term successes. I hope that we can also debate those. Again, inspired by songs. How can it be different that you're inspired by music when you are in Sweden? I started with a classic composer, but modern songs also bring us some inspiration. If we achieve short-term successes, perhaps in the long term, the Green Deal can get stuck on us, say like a tattoo. Congratulations, Sweden, on a historic win. And Finland, this is only because I couldn't blend cha-cha-cha into this closing. But thanks a lot for that historic win, and I hope that Sweden can continue inspiring us going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mess. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And thank you also for your personal thoughts and insights into the Commission's work on a green transition. You know, it seems to me that culture has been really a bit of a guiding thread throughout the whole conference. I mean, we started off with the train, the Sagotåg, you know, on the Junibakke to begin with, and we've gone all the way to the Vasa Museum. And now we also have speakers who are referring to lyrics, to music, and so on and so forth. It's very cultural. Thank you very much. Very sustainable for the future. Thank you. That being said, I would like to call our last keynote speaker, which is Mr. Johan Kuylenstierna, who is Director General at the Research Council entitled Formas.
Chair, Your Royal Highness, Mr. Speaker, parliamentarians, thank you for inviting me to talk to you here today on the most exciting topic, the transition, the green transition. We have to put this in a very serious context. We do have a code red for humanity. These are not my words talking about quotes. This is the Secretary General of the United Nations pointing out the seriousness of the situation. It's not the code red for the planet. It's a code red for humanity we are talking about here. The World Economic Forum stressed very clearly in its latest global risk report that 6 out of 10 major global challenges are environmentally related in the next 10 years. Climate, biodiversity, natural resources, all connected, of course, to human societies. And we know the reasons behind this. We have built societies of welfare, not least in Europe. We have showed leadership in this. And you can see from these pictures that these are not from Europe. But Europe is only one part of the world. When we talk about the green transition, the agenda is much broader than that. We talk about system shifts that in the end needs to lift the global population out of poverty and into a green future where we are resource efficient and can tackle global challenges such as climate change. This is the societal part of the challenge that we are talking about here today, but we also have the other part of society, the change part. We know that many of the global systems today are rapidly changing, and they are interacting with our societies in different ways. This is a challenge for Europe, but indeed it's a global challenge. We have impacts in Europe from droughts, floods, but the indirect impacts on Europe from droughts, floods, climate change, biodiversity loss elsewhere can be just as large as those direct impacts. Now they are more short-term. But in the longer run, we also see major shifts in terms of sea level rise, shifting atmospheric circulation, etc., that can give us changes that will be difficult for our modern societies to cope with. We have a new relationship. We are living in the Anthropocene, the time of humans, where we are a geological force on this planet in terms of how we are impacting on it. This means that we also need that mind shift change that the previous speaker talked about. How do we manage the planet? It's a finite planet, it's a rich planet. But in the Anthropocene, we have to tell a different story. We have a lot of challenges and crises, and you may ask if someone, someone beginning a message this way, can this be translated into what I talked about just at the outset, a positive agenda, the green transition? Well, I think that having a systems approach can really take us there to deal with those challenges. The Green Deal was really about going from fossil to non-fossil economies, but we know now, and you have demonstrated the leadership, both in the EU and among member states, that we have to also have other system shifts to deal with the whole green transition. It's about going from linear to circular economy in terms of how we use natural resources. It is about resource efficiency in times of crisis finally gaining momentum again, when we realize that resource efficiency is also a strategy for security in the future. We have to understand how this relates to geopolitics and security and resources. Again, something that the terrible war in Ukraine has reminded us. How we are susceptible to changes in the global trade system, and how the green transition is actually a geopolitical process. And as many or the both speakers have said before, the socio-economic dimensions of this are absolutely critical. So after having worked 30 years on climate and the whole transition, I am actually more optimistic than ever before. Can you imagine that after beginning my speech this way? Well, the reason is that it's obvious that we have all the crises. But what we see now in terms of what is happening at the European level, but also globally, the mind shift change is really the foundation for all the opportunities that the green transition also entails. The top-down approach from the Green Deal, with the broad framework, not just looking at the climate transition, but also really the whole socio-economic dimensions of this, the vision, getting the people on board in the transition. That top-down is meeting susceptible soils now, fertile soils for real change that we haven't seen before. An understanding of the system approach in terms of the transformation of all economic sectors, one being dependent on the other, where policies that you make are essential for the success. The technology dimension, digitalization, bringing opportunities that we couldn't even imagine 10, 15 years ago if technology is used the right way. The energy transition, renewable resources, potentially also nuclear, bringing us non-fossil resources, energy sources. The International Energy Agency points out in the next 5 years, 2,500 gigawatts of renewable energy will be added to the system globally. This equals the production generation of China today. This is a disruptive change in our societies. But even more important is the bottom-up force that we see now from cities, regions that really invest in the future. They see the opportunities to address not just climate challenges, but also many other challenges facing local communities today. And, as has also been stressed, the corporate sector moving out from talking about climate, biodiversity as environmental responsibilities to instead seeing this as market-driven business opportunities for the future. We have the fertile soil. But it doesn't mean, like you have stressed before, that we can just relax and think that everything will move smoothly now. We have new challenges coming up in terms of raw materials, an issue that is, of course, on the everyday agenda in this parliament here in Sweden. This is about geopolitics, but it's also about the transition. This is about the circular economy and resource efficiency. But it's not just about metals, it's also about bioresources, forestry, the security of the food system, which we have also been reminded about, unfortunately, in the last year. And finally, bringing the people on board, seeing that the green transition is just not a technological top-down project. This is about building the future societies for future generations. The national parliaments have a critical role in this. You are at the juncture between the global and EU policies and the bottom-up force of businesses and local communities. And I could have many, but 3 sort of messages that I would like to send to the discussion today. One, it's about catalyzing the transition, really upscaling and enabling change. It's more about carrots than sticks, potentially. The power and the force is there now among local communities and businesses. How can we speed up implementation by catalyzing change, enabling environment in terms of economic, legal, and social frameworks, for example? But it's also about multi-level governance, understanding how we connect the EU level all the way down to the local level and businesses in terms of implementation. It's about understanding the value chains and value webs. Global trade has increased tenfold since the Stockholm Conference in 1972. Economy 4 times and population doubled. So the global trade system, the flows of materials are connecting companies, people, countries across the globe. We can see now in many examples in business how a supply chain perspective enabling different ways of collaborating across the supply chains also generate innovation and new companies and new technologies. And my final message, the whole issue of the skills for the green transition, the competences. We can offer jobs in the new economy, but if we don't have the competences and skills there, people cannot take those jobs. The EU has been pushing this very hard during the Swedish presidency also, the skills for the green transition, the year of skills that I would like to see become a decade of skills and competence, where we connect the research and innovation power of the EU with the development of skills and competences in the current and next generation. So to end, I would like to quote, you talked about culture, I would like to quote a scientist because of the background where I'm coming from. The famous Danish chemist Niels Bohr, many has been attributed this quote, I know that, but I like to prefer it was him saying it. Predictions are difficult, especially about the future. This is the landscape you're operating in, so it's about future-proofing in terms of policies in the transition. There will be surprises, but with the right policies and the right decisions, we can be sure that we will also be able to harness all the opportunities that the green transition will bring to us. European competitiveness and really driving the transition of the entire world. Thank you very much.
Tack så jättemycket.
Thank you ever so much, Johan Kuylenstierna, for raising our awareness about the severity of the situation, but also very aptly provided us with optimism and hope for the future, and again with a poetic flourish at the end linked to your background. I will now open the floor for your comments. I would like to start by reminding you to stick to your allotted speaking time of 1.5 minutes, or perhaps even be briefer, because we have 40 speakers on our list, which means that we do need to share the speaking time out fairly in solidarity. We may be able to extend our time a little for this session to fit in as many speakers as possible. But I will say already at this point that if we do not keep our speeches more brief, then not everybody will get a chance to speak. But of course we will do our utmost to ensure that as many people as possible do get to speak on this important matter. If you have requested the floor, then again today it may take a little time before your name appears on the list, so please be patient. Please do try to be brief, and we will try to make this a very fruitful debate. In fact, I know that this will be.
To English, I think that will be easier, and I will start off by giving the floor to Mr. Ruben Moreno from Spain. You've got the floor.
Thank you so much, Your Highness. It's a pleasure to have you here. That it shows your interest in these fundamental matters. Señora Presidenta, la transición.
Chairman, the green transition is absolutely essential for us to achieve the greener future which we all wish. But gas nuclear energy and fossil fuels are obviously going to be with us for some time, playing a key role. And European policy does need to factor that in as we look towards the objectives for 2030 and beyond. The costs of decarbonisation must, of course, not be borne by the citizens, because it will simply drive up the price of energy for them. There are costs to the energy transition. Having said that, it is essential that we deliver this. We're going to have to continue to use gas until such time as renewables are infinitely cheaper. Between now and 2050, we're going to have to continue to using methane, for example, because a lot of the housing in Europe can't be refitted that quickly. Looking towards the future for nuclear, I wouldn't advocate there being new nuclear partitions, but I do think we could extend the lives of some of the current ones whilst we develop renewables, ideally at a faster pace. And then finally, expensive energy during a transition period will have a number of implications. It could even mean that we fall behind on the commitment to the transition. Therefore, we need to make sure that we have adequate raw materials to produce the batteries we need and the alternative fuels. It's not going to be an easy path ahead, but we have no alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. And then I give the floor to Stefano Candiani from Italy.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is an extremely important debate, and we would like to give our input into it, because if there's one thing that we can't allow ourselves, that is to be unclear about the long-term objectives. Obviously, we also have to consider how we are going to attain the objectives we have set ourselves, and we've actually stressed this on a number of occasions already in our discussions. It will be costly to achieve these ambitious targets, yet we do need to do it. But we need to manage the economy in an appropriate way, and we need to be aware that not all the countries, even within the European Union, have identical characteristics. For example, some of them need to have more rapid transition introduced in the residential home sector, others in construction. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, which might have been advocated many decades ago. Therefore, we need to have specially tailored solutions which are both ambitious but balanced. And we need to have a realistic time frame for delivering on these objectives. Otherwise, people will simply end up being frustrated and we will fail in our task. The European Parliament has an important role to play. Indeed, a role of paramount importance, because it has to bring together the different positions from the various member states and also the different reasons for which they have different outlooks. The European Parliament is going to be instrumental in bringing the countries together and in distilling from that a strategy for the future. As President Karas has said, it might be more convenient to try to draw a veil over reality, but we can't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. And I give the word to Marko Pavic from Croatia.
Thank you very much, Chair, Your Royal Highness. EU is responsible for 8 to 9% of the world greenhouse emissions. China, India and States are responsible for more than 50%, meaning that even if we meet the Fit for 55 criteria, we solve only 4 or 5% of world problem. Thus, we need to be global leader and get others to follow us. We showed that on COP26, we showed that in Paris Agreement, and myself as climate scientist who visited Antarctica, who's seen effect of 2 degrees global warming, I'm totally convinced that we must act. And we must show, as Director General said, system solutions, new technologies, sustainable development to achieve the targets, and we must do it together. Croatian Parliament will be involved in legislation of Fit for 55 package. We plan to become energy hub for Southeast and Central Europe by doubling our LNG capacity on island of Kirk. I'm proud that we are one of the countries that is very rich with water. Almost half of our electrical energy comes from hydro. 20% comes from wind, and just this week our Prime Minister opened the largest solar power plant in Croatia, moving the path for the decade of solar energy in Croatia. And finally, as former minister in charge of European Social Fund in Croatia, I'm really looking for the Climate Social Fund and to use the EU funds into solving social effects of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco, and I give the floor to Maria Huber, Austria.
Vielen Dank, Frau Vorsitzende.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Highness. Members, the climate crisis, of course, has a very significant economic dimension to it. We are engaged in global competition and we're trying to deliver the greenest, most environmentally friendly industry and processes. The US and China have actually proposed developments in recent times which require a clear response from Europe. We therefore need to give that. Climate policy can actually be turned into an economic advantage. The economy and climate protection, climate action have got to go hand in hand and have got to be implemented in such a way as to offer the industrial opportunities we need. We need to have green and clean products, and we are actually already market leaders in that. We need to build on that. We are also market leaders in technology and in innovation, and we need to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And I give the floor to Maria Jufareva-Skuratovski, Estonia. The floor is yours.
Your Royal Highness, Honored Chair, dear colleagues, well realized that green transition is a necessary step in reducing the EU energy's dependence and CO2 emissions. But at the same time, we must respect the energy mix of each member state, a fact that is also outlined in the COSAC contribution. Russia's aggression against Ukraine resulted not only in the great humanitarian crisis in Europe, but also caused the crisis in the terms of energy security, which we all faced in 2022. It was a great shock for governments, enterprises and private households. The prices on Nord Pool leading power market in Europe were not affordable for everyone. European governments had to seek different temporary options to support people, municipalities and businesses. We managed this challenge, but during this time we faced high risks to our energy security. Additionally, I want to highlight that every member state has to contribute to European energy security. Therefore, the green transition is a necessary step in reducing the EU's energy dependence. It is important that the energy mix of each member state is respected. For example, for the moment, oil shale is an important part of our energy security and remains so until all our energy needs are guaranteed by renewable energy. In order for our energy mix to meet all the necessary environmental requirements, we need to contribute into the implementation of technologies that lead us towards climate neutrality. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Maria. Well, I hope you excuse my pronunciation of your names. I know I will fail. I can see that on the speakers list, but I hope everyone gets the word who are supposed to get the word. And now I will try to give the word and the floor to Mark Demesmaeker from Belgium. The floor is yours.
That's right. Thank you. And Your Royal Highness, colleagues, I will speak in Dutch, my mother tongue. Doelstellingen zijn...
Thank you. Our targets are ambitious. They have to be ambitious. Of course, there are very good aspects to the whole package, but some of the presentations we have seen this morning have actually created concerns in my mind. I've been looking at headlines from the Flemish newspapers yesterday saying that the gas prices have actually fallen in comparison with last year. And the second one is talking about reducing use of gas because of warmer temperatures. It is true we haven't had such a very cold winter, but what I have also seen is that many people the entire winter over have sat in unheated houses and flats because of the spiralling energy prices. And I'm talking about people who are in employment as well. The Belgian Statistics Office last week published some statistics showing that about 50% of Belgians are struggling to get to the end of the month to pay their bills. Now, these are people who would be described as middle class in statistical terms. So these are telling figures. In our studies on energy and climate, there is also concern about the implications of the ETS system. The social costs will be high. Flanders is one of the richest regions in Europe. We are actually a net contributor, and yet there are problems in my region. And so this remains a preponderant concern in my mind. We're going to have to ensure that we deal with the concerns of individuals. How are we going to close nuclear power stations? How are we going to keep energy prices under control? How are we going to get enough energy? And we're going to have to change, we don't want to have to change Beethoven's Ninth Symphony from the Ode of Joy to a melancholy ending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And then I give the word to Andrzej Grzyb from Poland.
Your Royal Highness, Chair, thank you very much. It's a very interesting debate. I agree with the introduction. We are living in an Anthropocene era. But there won't be results when it comes to green transition if citizens do not move forward together in this process. Every country is different. Every country has a different energy mix, different kind of property ownership, different kind of local government, and this should be factored in. Plus, we've got some experience with COVID, with closing borders, with supply chains completely collapsing, a war, everything is different. And Repower EU, a new program, shows how important own resources are. I come from a region, from Western Poland, where transition is happening as we speak. We've got a program where citizens are participating, very much welcomed by citizens and also welcomed by the European Commission. It was approved by the local government. This is a good example. The Social Climate Fund is an essential factor here. We've got to communicate it to our citizens. I think we're doing very little in that respect. Very often our citizens don't really understand why they can't use certain goods. For example, they can't use cars that are not electric, and they don't know whether electric cars will be affordable. So we have to tell them how they can cope. The same goes for farm to fork. The crisis in Ukraine shows very clearly that farmers need to know how the green transition will impact the agriculture, but they need to be reassured. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrzej. And I give the word to Zoltán Tesli, Hungary.
Madam Vice Chair, Your Royal Highness, honourable colleagues, members of the House. Hungary supports the implementation of Fit for 55. We need to achieve these ever more ambitious targets whilst simultaneously guaranteeing economic and social sustainability, energy security, and also affordable energy prices. We need to reduce Europe's energy dependency. However, these changes should not lead to the creation of new unilateral dependencies. The Commission's impact assessment is important, and it needs to factor in the different circumstances that each member state finds itself in. When it comes to the energy mix, it is important that we respect our respective remits. It's also important that we set realistic targets and that the rules apply equally to all member states. It is also important that we preserve the competitiveness of our EU economy without penalising our population. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Zoltán. And I give the word to Lucia Tascher from Slovenia.
How did we get to Stockholm? Well, the ones who come from Slovenia traveled by plane. 2 planes, actually. We had connecting flights, and it took us half a day. If we wanted to take a means of sustainable transport, for example, train, we would have needed 1 day in 5 hours, and we would have had to change trains 6 times. Well, this is about the current connectivity between EU capital cities. When it comes to transport, we are talking about 1/4 of joint emissions of greenhouse gases. And these are the emissions we want to reduce by 2030 by at least 55%. And this is why my speaking time is going to be spent on one of the initiatives from the citizens of the European Union. I find it very important, and I find it one that can be put in practice. In April, the European Commission registered the initiative for a network of fast-speed trains. The citizens call upon the Commission to adopt an act for such an establishment of a network so that the capital cities in the EU would have been thus connected. And I think that this is the ideal opportunity for us to, as representatives of citizens, come together, step together, and call upon the Commission as COSAC so that we do not have to wait for all the deadlines in order to gather all the necessary signatures, so that we do get, as soon as possible, the Commission's opinion on this important project. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. And then I give the word to Pietro Lorefice from Italy.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And my greetings to Princess Victoria and also to all members of Parliament who are here this morning and more widely for this meeting. Today we're talking about the green transition. We are all very well aware of how important that is. It's vital that we manage to put together the optimal policies so that we can actually meet the challenges of the future in the next 20, 30 years. But many questions remain outstanding. How are we going to achieve these objectives? We need the appropriate economic instruments and tools. If we fail to put these together, we will land up in a situation where the member states can't actually deliver on these objectives. I want to see a more democratic, more fair transition. I want to see more solidarity across the countries and generations. But until we see such greater solidarity between the richer states and the less well-off countries, we will not actually be able to achieve our shared objective. Therefore, this needs to be a priority for our action. And in order to be more effective at a global level, we've got to come together and act as the United States of Europe, which means we need to leave our narrow-minded nationalisms at home, because they contribute less than nothing to the prospects and future of the European Union. Therefore, I hope that we will continue to make effective and efficient progress towards our objectives. But I would like to see it speeding up if we possibly can, and I'd like to see us moving away from fossil fuels as rapidly as we possibly can, stopping drilling for oil and gas in a sea such as the Mediterranean, which is effectively a closed sea and is being placed under constant threat by recourse to fossil fuels. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Pietro. And I will remind you of the 90-second rule, and then I give the floor to Aurelijus Veruga from Lithuania. Floor is yours.
Jūsų aukštenybė, pirmininkė, gerbiami kolegos, labai svarbu, kad mes ne tik kalbame, bet ir veikiame šioje srityje. Lietuvos parlamentas jau nustatė nacionalinį poveikio klimatui neutralumą iki 2050 metų tikslą, o 2021 metais buvo patvirtinta nacionalinė klimato kaitos valdymo darbotvarkė.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Now it's working. There was a problem with a mic. There was a problem with a mic. The mic wouldn't turn off, so technical problems.
In my Now I think it's working again. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay.
From Lithuania.
Your Royal Highness, Speaker, it is important that we are not only talking but also acting in this area. The Lithuanian Parliament established the impact target by the year 2050, and we also approved the climate management agenda. We also managed to reduce by 58% from 1990 greenhouse gases, and by 2030 we will aim to achieve 70% reduction. 1/4 of the energy we use in Lithuania is received from the renewables. By the year 2050, we will receive 80%. We're increasing the efficiency of energy. We are trying to modernize multi-story buildings. And also energy crisis caused by the Russian unprecedented war against Ukraine makes us shift towards green energy. That's why Lithuania is very favorable in terms of the reviewing the EU directive on renewable energy by 2030, and to increase the renewable part by 40% by 2030.
And I give the word to Raoul Boeke from Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair, Your Royal Highness. Thank you for the inspiring presentations by the panelists. Madam Chair, climate change, it is the subject that our generation is the last generation that can tackle it. But we are also the first generation that will suffer the consequences. And this is a topic not about saving the planet. It's a topic about saving the livelihood of our children and the ones that come after them. The EU has stepped up to the challenge. The EU has come with a comprehensive package of proposals, goals, but also measures. And it's now a matter of taking action. But, Madam Chair, make no mistake about it. It's also about our independence from China, our independence from Russia. It is also about our economy of the future, which products will we make for a greener and cleaner society. And thirdly, it should be a social transition. It will have to be a transition with the people of the EU and for the people of the EU. And to conclude, Madam Chair, we have set ambitious goals. We have taken unprecedented measures, but it will come down to action in our villages, in our cities, and in our rural areas, because we do this for our European citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raoul, and I give the word to Tomasz Nowak from Poland.
Your Royal Highness, Madam Chair, I come from a region where in 2030 we will definitely be climate neutral. This year and in 2024 we are leaving brown coal, which was extracted in my region, in the Konin region. So we have begun just transformation. We already started a just transformation fund. But it is important that in the Green Deal there is more consistency and, at the same time, flexibility to meet the climate goals. Technological flexibility is important. It is important that COSAC, in its conclusions, respects the energy mix of member states as one of the important principles. But the energy flexibility is also crucial in terms of nuclear energy. Nuclear is crucial. We need to have the stabilizer for renewables. Gas obviously is out of the question, so it seems that nuclear energy would be the best stabilizer. And Poland has not had nuclear energy, but we now want to move into nuclear energy. Let us also mention financial flexibility. If we have restrictions in such difficult times that we have now, to use the next generation funds would be so vital for the whole of the process. So the just transformation and the next financial perspective should be key, and we should increase the funds earmarked for that.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Dr. Anton Hofreiter from Germany.
Madam President, colleagues, Your Royal Highness, it seems to me that first of all, what we need to do is be aware of our mindset, if you like. You know, whether we're talking about the protection of our way of life, we have to, of course, protect the planet, but we're also aware of the fact that we need to rescue our own basis for living, if you like. We've talked about renewables. I think it would be important for us to look towards closer European cooperation in that area. The Republic of Ireland, for instance, has enormous potential when it comes to wind power. And I think it would be smart for us not only to cooperate with, say, Namibia, Chile, or Qatar, but rather to work together as Europeans to make that a closer cooperation. Also, I think that we need to remember the risk of extinction. It is just as important as the climate crisis. If you look at the most recent scientific data, you will see that since 1980, about 50% of our bird population has been lost. We're talking about birds, but we have to remember that, generally speaking, this is a question of survival over extinction. Therefore, it seems to me that these are issues that we need to address more closely. Make sure that we have a form of agriculture that can feed people whilst at the same time not destroying the very basis upon which we live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to remind you to keep your interventions short because we still have 25 on the speakers list. We can extend the session to 10:30 and then give the word back to our main speakers. But we have to sort of stop our debate at 10:30. So please use your words wisely. And with that, I give the floor to Cristina Madalina Pruna from Romania.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Your Royal Highness, dear colleagues. The key word in green transition is investments. The EU cannot achieve its goals without creating the framework for massive investments in green energy sources. And one of the main goals is to have affordable prices for consumers, for the industry, for our economies as a whole, and not to allow living standards to deteriorate, because there will be a lack of trust in the process from the Europeans, and we've seen it during the past 2 years with the energy crisis. The EU has many instruments through which it can enhance investments, and REPowerEU has done great steps in that direction through easing permitting, reducing bureaucracy, and this approach should continue. One of the key pillars is our common market, and we should not forget about it. Having a common strategy, a free market, ensuring competition in the areas of production and supply is key to have affordable prices. It is also a way to show companies and stakeholders that our intentions are solid. Romania supports a balanced mix, having indigenous gas resources as a transition fuel and nuclear energy to reduce our CO2 emissions, and this can contribute to energy security. In conclusion, investments, balanced energy mix, and free market, and this is the way to have a successful energy transition and to have affordable prices for all Europeans. Thank you.
Thank you. And the floor is Jean-François Rapin, France.
Votre Altesse Royale.
Your Royal Highness, colleagues, given the dramatic consequences of global warming, the green transition is of key importance. As a French proverb says, the road to hell is paved with good intentions and the devil is in the detail. There are two controversial subjects here, nuclear and agriculture. The war, Russia's war against Ukraine, has again raised the need to reduce our dependence on Russian gas and to improve our energy efficiency, not just from a climatic point of view, but from considerations of sovereignty. We have ambitious but realistic views on the green transition, and we defend a return to all low-carbon options, including nuclear, which will allow us to better safeguard our energy independence in Europe vis-à-vis external providers. In 1957, when the European Economic Community was created, we also created Euratom, the European Economic Nuclear Energy Community. We must guarantee our energy supply. And the greening of the Common Agricultural Policy raises increased concerns for our farmers and our food industries. The French Senate has rung the alarm bell, saying that the Green Pact risks setting back European agriculture by 20 to 30% in coming years. I leave you to reflect on those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Anna Kwisien, Poland.
Wasza Wysokość.
Your Royal Highness, Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Poland supports the green transition. However, our proposals and our action cannot lead to greater and greater burden on our citizens and energy poverty, because that would hit disproportionately the most vulnerable in our member states and the SME sector. We all understand that change is absolutely essential. However, we have to look at the particular circumstances of the member states. We don't start from the same positions, and we can't have the same ambitious goals. Every member state should have its own energy mix. Poland appreciates that it's absolutely crucial to invest in nuclear energy, which is a stable source of income or of energy, and it's extremely important to supplement the energy mix with nuclear energy. That is why I believe that it's not just solar energy, wind power, heat pumps, and geothermal energy. The nuclear energy should be included. Therefore, we also need simplification of procedures and easier funding. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Per Juan Ponsampietier from Spain.
Gracias, primero a su Alteza Real, por estar con nosotros.
Thank you very much indeed. As I said yesterday in the panel, we can, of course, look to the past and replicate solutions from the past, or we can look towards the future. But for us, we need to focus on 2050. If we don't deliver change, we are going to disappear. That's the elephant in the room. Might I just say briefly to some of those who gave presentations this morning, do you actually think that nuclear is sustainable and green? Because the principle of do no significant harm is quite self-evident and clear. This sort of taxonomy is questionable at best. Secondly, Christine Lagarde talked about financing the future at the World Economic Forum. So could you comment on the recovery and resilience funds in that context? Do you think that they will actually address the crisis adequately? And do you think that this funding will actually change the climate dilemma? I've listened to a lot of very interesting comments, but I'm concerned about climate populism, which basically is a delusion which is being peddled to the people. I've heard many references to that, and I think it's something which is very often evident in our parliaments. Of course, we live in democracies, but we do need to address it, and I wonder whether you can suggest any solutions we might adopt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, a name I know how to pronounce, Per Holmgren, European Parliament.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Great pronunciation of my name. It could be tricky for some. Royal Highness, colleagues, of course, this is indeed a very, very important debate, but at the same time, we really need to make sure that we don't turn this into some sort of collective exercise in greenwashing, by neglecting the extreme urgency of the situation. I always have mixed feelings when I hear about the European Union's leadership in climate transition. Yes, we are more ambitious than the United States. Yes, we're more ambitious than China, at least currently. But at the same time, we're so far away from what is needed according to science. The 55% should have been 70%. Climate neutrality by 2050 should have been climate neutrality by 2040. This means that the rest of the carbon dioxide budget, that is explaining how much more remaining of greenhouse gases we can emit if we still want to be remaining within the Paris Agreement, will decrease very fast from now on. And that is due to two reasons. The first is, of course, that we're not ambitious enough when it comes to mitigation. But the second reason is much, much more worrisome to me, because at the first time now, on a global scale, we're seeing signs of feedback from the Earth system itself, from the oceans, from the vegetation, releasing greenhouse gas back into the atmosphere. And this, to me, is a clear sign that we're into a very, very bumpy ride. We need to address mitigation, yes, but we also need to address climate adaptation much more, and also, of course, climate justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Ellen Salmon, Belgium.
Dank u, mevrouw de voorzitter. Haar hoogheid.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. Colleagues, in terms of the green transition, we need to diversify our energy sources. We need to focus on reliable energy sources and green energy policies. And we have to consider nuclear from that point of view. We need to ensure also that our energy sources are not simply sold off to foreign powers. We have seen the implications of dictatorships. We've agreed within the European Union that we need green transition, that we also need to divest from Russian energy sources and do nothing which would strengthen the Russian economy or indeed the Russian powers. But we've also got to think very carefully about electricity sources, about value chains, about supply chains, about batteries. Too much is in the hands of China. China is, after all, barely better than Russia. It's a totalitarian system. It oppresses its citizens, and therefore we need much more independence from China as well. Therefore, we need to diversify as a matter of urgency. We need new energy sources for the future, such as hydrogen. I haven't seen nearly enough reference to that in the notes and heard enough in the comments this morning. We've really got to address both the financing and the policy delivery as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I give the word to Hanna Kosonen, Finland.
Arvoisa puheenjohtaja.
Distinguished Chair, Your Royal Highness, the European Union has been a pioneer and has been showing example in the change from a linear fossil economy to a non-emitting circular economy, because we were the first countries to enjoy the increased standard of living due to these changes. It seems now, at least in Finland, that businesses are even more prepared for a faster change and more ambitious regulation than politicians are. Daniel Mess spoke about how success is based on how the change is made. Everyone should be kept along so that we can succeed in this change that will benefit everyone. But not all citizens are there yet. It is easier to justify the changes to citizens if we carry out smart regulation and don't just take measures that will transfer the emissions elsewhere. We still have work to do in order to avoid
a division of votes, such as happened in the Eurovision Song Contest between Loreen and Käärijä Cha-Cha-Cha.
Thank you very much. Give the word to Pierre-Alexandre Anglade from France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Your Royal Highness, the Green Deal allows us to build the most ecological continent in the world. By 2030, we'll have reduced our CO2 emissions by 55%. By 2050, we'll be carbon neutral. However, if we want to be truly sovereign and independent and efficient, there are two battles we need to fight. First of all, the energy transition, that's one. We need to speed that up, make more investments into renewables, hydrogen, of course, but don't forget about nuclear energy because it is safe, it is decarbonised, and it has proven its worth. Second battle is re-industrialisation. It is of utmost importance, economically speaking, geopolitically speaking, but also environmentally speaking. We know that industry is very important for the future. Batteries, for instance, you talked about that earlier on. You spoke about the new plant in Dunkirk. Photovoltaics, again, with Sarreguemines, very much in the front line of that in France. All of that is essential in order to guarantee biodiversity, to face climate change, and also to create jobs and safeguard our sovereignty, as has been argued by previous speakers. So it is possible to win these battles in Europe. We can do it, provided we are consistent and logical, and provided we have a stable and lasting framework which doesn't change from one European mandate to the next. When foreign investors invest in Europe, it's good for our jobs, it's good for our countries, so together, let's step up the pace as 27.
Thank you very much, and we will continue another 5 minutes to give more speakers the chance to get the floor, but then we had to cut and give the words back to our main speakers, and we will only have 15 minutes coffee break then. But everything to give you the chance to say what you want to say on green transition. So, Firmino Marques, Portugal, the floor is yours.
Senhora Vice-Presidente,
Madam Vice Chair, Your Royal Highness, colleagues, in a framework for safeguarding the environment, any state's contribution to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, as set out by the European Union, is key. Construction and renewal for families of lower incomes requires a high level of requirements for energy efficiency. Member states should be more proactive, both when it comes to information and in technical support for good implementation, by not running the risk of stressing to meet deadlines. Some countries have economic difficulties in implementing measures to achieve a green, equitable and just transition. We know that in Portugal, the energy crisis obliges us to think more about greater solidarity in Europe and greater energy independence. We know that renewables have allowed us to have greater energy autonomy and sovereignty. This is why we talk about solar energy as being an important contributor. We cannot, however, let solar farms allow for degradation of our environments, which is harmful to local flora and fauna, which is key to continued life on Earth. Such initiatives must be compensated in solidarity, and solidarity should go both ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I give the floor to Andres Bruds from Latvia.
Royal Highness, Madam Chair, thank you. Of course, green transition is extremely important for Europe globally, but also for Europe domestically, for our societies. And we commend Sweden for leadership also in green transition, for showing the example also during the Swedish presidency. I guess quite important regulations such as carbon adjustment mechanism, the electricity market designs have been implemented, so which is important. But of course, homework should be continued for our region, and not only. One of the important elements is interconnectivity. Interconnectivity which ensures that there is a level playing field, that there are no just separate energy green transition islands, but we are very much interconnected. There is no inequality among member states. But of course, what is even more important, we should also ensure there is no inequality among the societies or societal groups. All transitions have their winners and also losers. And that's why, of course, a social mechanism, social support for those who potentially lose out of transition should be ensured. So political will and also financial resources should be on cards, on agenda for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker will be Georgios Kyrtsos from European Parliament. The floor is yours.
Thank you. We face major strategic challenges concerning green transition. Several factors combine to cause an increase in the cost of energy and the cost of living in general. I agree that we need some immediate successes so as to create political trust and push forward with green transition. Unfortunately, we have certain short-term failures, like the increase in the energy bill for households and electric cars that are too expensive for many Europeans. Another strategic challenge has to do with the relative energy cost for the European industry and the European economy. Our energy cost is much higher than the energy cost of the USA, and our competitive disadvantage keeps increasing due to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Our transition strategy is ambitious and rightly so, but we have to improve and complete it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues, for fruitful discussions and your big commitment and interest in green transition. I now want to give the floor back to our main speakers for just 2 minutes each comment on what you've heard here in the debate. And I start off with giving the floor to Helen. Varsågod.
Thank you, dear Chair, and it will be very briefly because you are waiting for coffee time, the Swedish fika. So I will say thank you to all of you for important inputs and also great inspiration for the future. It led me to 2 conclusions. The first one, we must use the perspective from top down to bottom up. Now the green transition must be both local, national and international. And this means that we must meet all the citizens in solidarity. And the second one from my side, there is no conflict between sustainability and growth, because for the future we must use the green transition to achieve both growth and sustainability and of course gender equality. Thank you so much for this inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helene Fritzon. And then I give the word to Mr. Daniel Mess. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I can also echo that this has been a rich debate. It is also like bringing lots of messages that we should bring back home to Brussels. What I thought was also interesting was, as a takeaway, is that, you know, that it's so clear from this debate that the power of the moment to do this clean energy transition has never been that strong, because we hear from Lithuania, a direct neighbor of a country that is waging war on Europe, to the Netherlands, that this move to clean energy, to renewable energy, is actually freedom energy. It's moving to freedom and independence. And I think that momentum is the important one to capture, because it shows that no matter our perspectives, we agree on that line. Now, very briefly, and this is the most difficult topic because this came from across the delegations in Europe, and I totally understand why. Yeah, the energy prices we are discussing at our breakfast tables, lunch tables, and dinner tables, and that's of course the main bottleneck that we need to tackle in all of this. So in the big picture, we started the European Green Deal thinking that the common approach, the common denominator in Europe would be that indeed you have coal and then you transition to gas and then you go to the renewable energy, and this war has changed that dynamic entirely because, as a speaker already said, gas is a bit out of the equation as a major transition, but it does mean that, you know, we will use coal a bit longer. As long as we accelerate that move to renewables, you might end up in the same place where you want to be overall. And to finish on
The third point, which is really the important one, how do we show that this can work for citizens? Indeed, a lot of this needs to happen in neighborhoods, and there also national parliaments have a good role to play. There are cities in the Netherlands, for instance, that have appointed community neighborhood ambassadors that have a place in the square where you can show what your house could look like when it's renovated, when it uses circular materials. And that's really strong because, a person like that is far more powerful to convince the neighbors than I, for instance, could ever be. So I think that's a very promising thing. And in Europe, we, of course, try to help in setting the direction. As Frans also said, reindustrialization is important here, opportunities to grow green industries here. And indeed, the European Commission should also help to show that we have skin in the game here compared to the US and China. But it doesn't change this major challenge that we have, that indeed, in order to show that this can work for citizens, I think that the only realistic way to show it is that from neighborhoods, look at your neighbor. You can have a life that is living sustainably, but you're prosperous at the same time. And we need lots of local support to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Mr. Johan. I've said Kulenstierna for so many years, but now I know it's Kylenstierna. For your last comments, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and for giving me the opportunity to have the final word. That's amazing. I can echo, of course, my fellow panelists here, but maybe try to add a couple of things. First of all, extremely interesting discussion. Coming from a research and innovation funder, I really suck in all the things that you're talking about here to try to translate that into what this means for a future research and innovation agenda. We tend to focus very much green transition on technologies, the technological aspects, but it's very obvious that this is very much about social development, economic development, governance issues, and I think this is absolutely critical, so it's interesting to listen to all this. A couple of words that I really find in a positive way striking. Focus on opportunities. It's about leadership. European leadership for the transition in a global sense, working together, combining security dimensions into this, security of supply, security and sustainability, urgency, as we also heard from one of the parliamentarians. But finally, we talked a lot about adaptation to local level, to people, and one thing I still miss a little bit from the discussion that I had as one of my final points that I don't think we talk enough about is the issue of skills and competence. We need to build the skills and competence of the population, of Europeans, us, the citizens. And this begins in schools, but it runs all the way up to universities and lifelong learning. So we need to talk much more about the skills and competence needed, because this is how citizens in Europe will then be able to take advantage of the green transition. Otherwise, we risk losing the jobs and the competitiveness to other parts of the world. So that's my final word.
Thank you very much. And I will switch back to Swedish. Tack till våra...
Thank you to our keynote speakers and to colleagues for interesting contributions to a very fruitful debate. And we can note that we had more willing speakers during this debate than what we actually had time for, although we did do our utmost to try and fit in as many as possible. So I suppose that will have to be something to consider for the next COSAC meetings during the Spanish presidency. Environmental destruction is a threat to our continued existence, and our shared work for a green transition and to reach our high environmental targets is of crucial importance for our shared future. I would also like to express my warm thanks to Her Royal Highness, who has listened to this debate and will continue to stay with us for some of the debate on Ukraine. Her Royal Highness, Speaker, colleagues, we are now approaching a very short coffee break. We have a 15-minute break, but first
I'll have to ask you all to stand up or rise.
Det var ju ett mycket bra pass.
Och så återsamlas vi 11. Stort tack. Tack Len. Tack.
Fint och ses.
Ja, verkligen. Kristianstad-län.
Då kan man om man vill sätta sig.
So, if you wish, you can be seated again, or you can quickly leave the chamber for your coffee break, and then we will reconvene at 11 for our next session on Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Raz, dva, tři a poznáme, je to slyšet?
Prostě fyzicky zapnout, jo?
No, prostě on vstal za...
Aha.
Please all rise.
Prašome atsistoti.
So you can start already using the headphones because I'm quite quickly going to switch over to Swedish, but in preparation for your headphones I can say to my sibling country Finland that it's not only the Eurovision Song Contest that we have won, we won also the ice hockey yesterday. And in honor to the Republic of Finland, I'm now wearing my Moomin cufflinks. So we are still friends and siblings, even if Sweden now have beat you twice. But as I said, you were first into NATO. With that, I now switch over to Swedish. Hennes Kungliga Höghet.
Her Royal Highness, Speaker, dear colleagues, welcome back to our session number 4, which may be our most anticipated one, although I have to say that we've had a very high level of quality and a great deal of content in our previous 3 sessions. We have 3 keynote speakers here for our session on Ukraine. We have our dear colleague Ivana Klimpush-Tsinsadze, and I apologize for the pronunciation. She is the chair of Ukraine's integration in the EU committee. Anders Arnlid, who is chair for the ad hoc working party for the use of frozen and immobilized assets to support Ukraine's reconstruction, and Jean-Éric de Zagon, who is actually Swedish and who is head of the representation of the European Investment Bank in Ukraine. As usual, I will open the speakers list, and you can, in fact, request to be on the speakers list now after the first keynote speech by pressing Request the Floor. I will give the floor now without further ado to our first keynote speaker, my dear friend Ivana from Ukraine. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Hans. Your Royal Highness Crown Princess Victoria, Your Excellency Speaker Andreas Norlén, dear Chair and host Hans Wallmark, dear colleagues, dear friends. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for devoting a separate panel to discuss the precious and most important issues for Ukraine. First and foremost, I want to use this stage to thank the Swedish presidency for not only keeping up high up on the agenda for the whole Europe, all the very important issues that will be necessary for the future success of the EU, but also on behalf of the Ukrainian people, on behalf of the Ukrainian nation, to thank you for keeping Ukraine very high on the top of the priority list for the EU for the support that we are still in need of. Also, I would like to use this opportunity to extend our most sincere gratitude to all your nations that have been backing the resolve, the bravery, the courage of the Ukrainian people standing up to the pure evil. So we are grateful for you for rendering all different types of support to those people who are wholeheartedly not only defending their land, but their motherland, but they are defending the very basic things that are cherished in this community: the freedom of choice, the freedom of speech, security, rule of law, rules, procedures, so all those things that this community was built on. So I am grateful for all your nations stepping up your support in the last 15 months out of this 8 years and 15 months war. And I'm grateful for the humanitarian aid, for the financial aid, for the sanctions pressure on the Russian Federation, for the clearing the way for punishment of the Russian Federation, and most importantly, I'm also very grateful for the major humanitarian support for Ukraine, which is providing us with weaponry. But I think that we all agree that it's not the time to actually rest on our laurels yet. This night was yet another very, very scary night in Ukraine and in Kyiv. Russians have been using cruise missiles, have been using supersonic missiles, ballistic missiles to attack the capital of Ukraine, to attack other cities in Ukraine. And only due to the instruments that you have provided us with, because we had the air defense, and we had the anti-rocket defense, and we had the excellent ability of our military to use them, we have gone through this night with minimum of destruction and with minimum of human life loss. So that means that we are, at this point, still having to get all together to this most important common denominator, which has to underpin the end game of this war. And the end game of this war has to be Ukraine's victory in this war. And the end game has to be defeat of the evil and defeat of the bully. So we believe that the victory of Ukraine, that is restoring the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of Ukraine, but also is preserving and saving the international law from the attempted murder. And this is our common task, I believe. So I think that we should not be afraid. And that's the most important message that I would like to get to you. You've been standing up to the bully. You've been standing up to the attempt to ruin the international order as we know it. And we should be ready to continue being strong together and be ready to eliminate that threat that Russia is posing not exclusively to Ukraine, but is actually posing to the whole world. And do not forget, its end goal, Russia's end goal, is not Ukraine. It's not only eradicating our people from the map of the world, it is about ruining the remnants of that international law and order as we know it. And it is about getting back to the Iron Curtain borders of 1997. So if we fail to preserve Ukraine, if we fail to preserve it as a sovereign and independent state, that will not mean that Ukraine fails. That will mean that the international community will fail. That will mean that Europe will fail, that the Euro-Atlantic community fails. And as my good friend and very serious analyst from UK, who is now serving in Estonia, James Sher, put it, and alliance or union unity will not diminish the consequences of that failure. So I hope that we understand our common responsibility. I hope that in understanding of that responsibility, such news as one that we heard yesterday, that one of the EU member states yet again blocked the next tranche of the European Peace Facility for military support to Ukraine, will not be tolerated by those who really believe and care and stand up for declared values. So we are counting on your help, dear colleagues. So once we all have the same ground, what we want to achieve all together, and once we all will deal with all the signs and shadows of fatigue that is coming sometimes to some of our societies, we will be able to look to another horizon. And we will be able to look to the horizon of recovery, of reconstruction, of development in Ukraine, where I'm sure that everyone who has been standing with us over this period of time will have the possibility for growth and development. And we will be welcoming every effort of your support in that respect, in that regard. So on the top of the urgency of the delivery, the quality of the weaponry for Ukraine, we definitely need your engagement in terms of not only protecting our people, but also helping them to restore even the basic signs of normality of our lives, even in this period of tough war. And that means that we need some certain rapid damage and that has to be done right now. According to the estimates of the international financial organizations, approximately $14 billion are needed this year just to restore the very basic things in energy sector, in housing, in destroyed housing, in transportation, in social infrastructure, which is critical, or with help, or in help to Ukrainian SMEs. And more than $3 billion have been allocated by the Ukrainian government. Another 11 we would have to find with your support. But that is just the closest prospect. Obviously, the damage that is caused to Ukraine by the most modest estimates is more than 400 billion, according to the, again, international community. So we are hoping that through the multi-donor platform, we will be able to gather the support that is needed both from public resources but also from private resources in the future, and that you will also pitch in the centralized way to support the government of Ukraine, but also will use every possibility to create horizontal ties with our communities, with our cities, with our villages that are in dire need of your support. We are all looking forward to the London conference of June 2023 that will follow the path of the previous common effort of the Swiss and Ukrainian government. Now it will be hosted by the UK and Ukrainian government. But for me, it's very important that this conference will not only be recovery and reconstruction conference, that it will be also reform conference. And I believe that these two streams have to be going hand in hand, because that is the chance for the future of Ukraine. And that means that our ability to restore ourselves, to transform ourselves, will allow for the people of Ukraine to be going through a quick and successful path of European integration. And we will be an important and strong part of your community. We are very much counting on you in supporting us on this difficult but very, very important path for us. So I only want to echo what Hans was saying yesterday. Arm Ukraine, support Ukraine, and don't get tired. We don't have the right. Thank you.
Tack.
Thank you very much, Ivana. Thank you very much for your words. We express our warmest solidarity with your country, with Ukraine, and all our colleagues in the Ukrainian Parliament, the Rada. So thank you. I will now move on and welcome another dear friend, Anders Arnlid. Please, you have the floor.
Your Royal Highness, Chairman, dear friend, members of Parliament, it is a great honour for me to address this conference between the European Parliament and the EU Affairs Committees of national parliaments. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk you through the work that has been initiated by the Swedish presidency of the Council of the European Union in order to use frozen Russian assets for reconstruction in Ukraine, and I've been given the great privilege of chairing that initiative.
Matter is no doubt of utmost importance. Support for Ukraine evidently is a top priority for our European Union, as it is for the Swedish EU presidency. The EU leaders also attach considerable importance to the possible use of frozen and immobilized Russian assets for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The 27 heads of state and government have repeatedly reiterated this point. In March this year, as you know, the European Council concluded, and I quote, "Together with partners, the European Union will continue to step up work towards the use of Russian frozen and immobilized assets for Ukraine's reconstruction and for the purposes of reparation in accordance with EU and international law. And that was the 5th time that our leaders referred to this topic in their conclusions. Now, in order to follow the instruction to step up this work, the Swedish presidency proposed the establishment of an ad hoc working party on the use of Russian frozen and immobilized assets. The decision to form the group was taken by the Council in February. The mandate of the group concentrates on Russian assets that have been frozen or immobilized under the EU sanctions regime, which by now, as you know, consists of 10 sanctions packages that have been decided upon since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Working Party has been given a 2-year mandate. It is reporting to the EU Foreign Affairs Council, and it is chaired by the rotating EU presidency. Thus, from the 1st of July, Spain will take over the helm. Now, from a moral and humanitarian point of view, it's very easy to conclude that using the frozen Russian assets for Ukraine's reconstruction is the right thing to do. However, as is often the case, in real life, such a move is not without complications and challenges, and that is yet another reason for why the ad hoc working party is needed. The construction of any mechanism for the use of frozen assets requires a holistic analysis. The working party is therefore mandated to pursue work on the legal, financial, economic and political analysis of the feasibility of using Russian frozen assets. In addition, the group is mandated to carry out preparatory work on any relevant proposals and initiatives that could lead to decisions by the Council. There is one important requirement concerning such proposals or initiatives. According to our mandate, they must be in accordance with EU and international law. And that requirement, as you understand, makes the task of the Working Party quite challenging. Our European Union is a union built on the rule of law, also during dire straits such as those we presently find ourselves in. In fact, that is an important part of what separates us from authoritarian states and rivals. And it evidently does not make sense to put forward proposals that would risk being revoked by our own courts. So far, the working party that I'm chairing has held 4 meetings. As the work of the group, for obvious reasons, must be of a confidential nature, I hope you understand that I cannot go far into the details of our deliberations. However, I can report that the work of the group proceeds along 3 strands. First, the working party must develop a good understanding of the data showing the frozen and immobilized Russian assets. This work includes determining the value, ownership, type and location of the relevant assets. This picture is not yet fully clear. Several aspects must be sorted out. Are we talking of private or public assets, depending on which different legal frameworks apply? Are we talking of cash, financial assets, goods or real estate? Again, different type of assets have to be treated differently. There are, as you are aware, several estimations concerning the value of frozen Russian assets being referred to in the public debate. When it comes to the publicly owned Russian assets, reference is often made to the assets of the National Bank of Russia, which before the war was reported to amount to some $300 billion in G7 countries. And these assets are now immobilized. In addition to that, there are frozen assets, of course, of sanctioned Russian individuals and entities, and they are estimated to add up to some 20 billion euros. We are now awaiting the result of the more stringent reporting requirements that the EU decided upon a few months ago, and hope to have a good grasp of the factual situation in the coming meetings of our group. The second task that we are facing is to assess the feasibility and appropriateness of possible options for the use of the frozen and immobilized Russian assets. Again, options are likely to differ between public and private assets. To illustrate, possibilities to confiscate private frozen assets may already exist if the owner has been found guilty of crime, and work is ongoing in other parts of the Council structure to strengthen the possibilities to use criminal law for this purpose. On the other hand, the possible use of public assets, such as the assets of the Central Bank of Russia, must be considered in relation to, among other things, the principle of state immunity. It is not a secret that one of the options that we are looking at is to use the revenue from the Russian Central Bank's assets for reconstruction of Ukraine. However, I would like to underline that we continue also to want to make sure that we maintain a broad range of possible options on the table. The third and final task that we are facing is to keep track of what is going on in other fora, and most importantly, among G7 countries. The positions of Japan, presently G7 President, the United States and the United Kingdom, of course, are important to the work of the group, as is what is happening in Canada, where new legislation, as you know, has entered into force. Ideally, G7 countries should move ahead in tandem with our European Union. At this juncture, I will refrain from speculating about how much it's possible to achieve in the ad hoc working party in terms of results during the Swedish presidency. However, we shall certainly work hard to push the process as far as possible towards concrete results. One thing is clear: to reach results, we must look not only at constraints, but also at possibilities in this quite exceptional situation, and we must be result-oriented. To deliver on the mandate from the 27 heads of state and government in our European Union, all EU member states must now take their responsibility, and the large member states particularly so.
I very much look forward to a number of further meetings within the ad hoc working party. I want to make sure that the Swedish presidency pushes this work forward as much as it possibly can before we hand over the presidency to Spain. And it's still my hope that we will be able to present tangible steps in the right direction before the Council of Ministers and the European Council at the end of June. Thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce our work.
Excellent and eloquent, dear Anders. And now we have Jean-Éric de Zagon from the European Investment Bank for supporting Ukraine. Please, Jean-Éric.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for welcoming me to this event. Just a quick reminder, the European Investment Bank is your bank, is the bank owned by the 27 member states of the European Union. So everything the bank does, we do it under your mandate. The highest instance of the bank is the Council of the Governors, which are the Ministry of Finance from 27 member states. I'm a banker, so I have a few slides with me with figures. And the first thing, I would like to explain to you today what are the needs of the reconstruction of Ukraine today and how EIB will try to help to reconstruct the country. The first figures I would like to show is coming from a study done by the European Commission and the World Bank. You see that today the damages done by the Russians' aggression is about $135 billion US. Now, if we want to reconstruct Ukraine in a good way, the estimation is they're going to cost something like $411 billion US. What is the difference? The difference is that what we'll call the book value, and when you reconstruct something, some of these assets are quite old, but still the hospital, the schools were working. If you want to reconstruct today with modern standards, also more with energy efficiency for many buildings, it will cost about $411 billion. So the difference you see there is really do it with the new standards, with more environment-friendly standards. And that is what Ukraine wants to do. So 411 billion. Now, this is a huge amount. EIB is the largest supranational bank in the world, and our total balance sheet is something like 600, 700 billions. So 411 billion is a huge amount. Now, on the right-hand side, you will see the split of these 411 billions. You will see that this has a lot to do with transport, with municipal infrastructure and energy, plus the rest. One figure, 38 billions for, we call that management of explosive devices. In fact, it is demining. 38 billion has to be paid for demining. You can construct a lot of hospitals and schools for that money. Now, when you face this kind of figure, 411 billion, obviously you have to prioritize. And the Minister of Reconstructions, the Minister of Finance, have agreed on a figure of about $14 billion as very, very urgent need to be done over the 6 to 18 coming months. Of these 14 billions, 3 billions will be absorbed by the budget of Ukraine, but 11 billions have to be done very, very quickly. EIB will try to help with my friends and colleagues from the World Bank and EBRD. We'll try to split this 11 billion. We'll expect the EU to help and the G7, but we will take a part of that. And you can see again that 3.5 billion represent what we need to do for municipal infrastructure. And the rest is the split, is classical between transport, energy, and other things. But 3.5 billion for municipal infrastructure, and that is really needed quickly. Now, what will be the process? I mean, the first thing is obviously we have to focus very much on the public sector. Why is that so important? If you don't have the public sector reconstructed quickly, people will not come back to Ukraine. If you don't build schools, hospitals, and so on, the 5 million people living today in Sweden, in Poland, in Bulgaria, they will not go back to Ukraine. I mean, the first question when you speak to Ukrainians, and I have many friends, they say, can I find a school for my children? So you need to start with the public infrastructure, and that's going to be a focus of EIB. So you need to go very hard on the municipal infrastructure and very quickly. Then, if you don't have energy, if you don't have transport, I mean, first the people are going to freeze in the winter. It's minus 20 in the winter in Ukraine. And the second thing, you will not have companies coming back. You will not have the private sector coming back. If they cannot transport the goods, if they don't have energy for the factories, what can they do? So you need to have really the public investment starting very, very quickly. They have started, but going on at a higher speed. Then, if you have that, yes, then I think the private sector will come in. And the private sector is absolutely needed. The public sector cannot finance 411 billion. So the private sector is needed, and they will come in if we do very careful about what we have to do in the public sector. Then there are challenges, obviously. I mean, the first thing is that the capacity of absorption will be difficult. The IFIs together, we used to put something like 3-4 billion in Ukraine before the war. It was not that easy for Ukraine to absorb these 4 billions. Now we talk about absorbing 14 billions in 12 months. That's difficult. So that is the first challenge, the absorption capacity of the country. And the second thing is that if we lend 11 billion, it has to be at very good terms. IMF has done a study on that, and this debt has to be sustainable. That means that what we charge as the interest rate on this debt has to be quite low. And that is something we have been looking into with IMF. Now, if we talk about EIB, but it's also the case with EBRD and World Bank, we will try to support development of capacity. You have a new agency in Ukraine for the restoration that will try to work on that, and we will try to cooperate with this agency on capacity building. EIB will commit something like 100 million only for technical assistance to support the capacity building in Ukraine. Then on the long-term sustainability of the debt, I mean, EIB, when we walk outside of the EU, we used to rely on the Commission who guarantee our operation. But that makes it possible for us to have very, very good conditions when we on land. Unfortunately, That mechanism doesn't work today. Due to the war, the provisioning rate of the Commission is much higher than it used to be. So technically it doesn't work today, so we are looking to kind of intermediate solution before we can come back to that one that we are negotiating. And I will come back to what kind of intermediate solution we have today. Now, just to give you a quick view on what EIB has been doing in Ukraine so far, we have lent something like 7.5 billion to Ukraine. We have committed loans for that amount. Since we started in 2007, we used to rely on this guarantee from the Commission, and we are one of the largest lender in Ukraine with the World Bank and the EBRD. You can see the split. It's a very classical one. We have a lot in transport, but municipal infrastructure is obviously very important. And then we also try to finance the private sector with a large focus on SMEs that accounts for a big part of this pie chart. Now, just want to underline the social infrastructure. EIB is in fact the only IFIs that have been really doing that in detail. We have done hundreds and hundreds of projects of hospitals, schools, and we did that before the war, very much in the eastern part of Ukraine that was already damaged by the invasion of 2014-2015. And we had 3 programs. The first one was one of 200 millions. We did, again, hundreds of hospitals and schools. That was a success, so we increased that program by 340 million. And we also have a 300 million program for energy efficiency for public building. So EIB has a very strong expertise in financing social infrastructure, also in difficult areas. Then there will be 3 phases, if you want, on how we can support Ukraine. The first one is what we did very quickly. We did last year, 22 and 23. That was, we committed something like 2.3 billion to Ukraine very rapidly. I come back in the details. And there were a grant of 60 million that we proposed for, to support the country. We are in a situation where we have the need to find a kind of intermediate solution. That's what we call the EU for Ukraine package initiative. And going forward, we will again try to find a solution with the Commission. And that is important because, as you know, Ukraine is a candidate of the European Union, and EIB is the bank supporting in general the transition from a candidate to a member state. Then, just to go into details with what we did since the war started. In March of last year, we financed 670 million to the state of Ukraine. That went really to the budget, to the Ministry of Finance. We used that for quick repairs. I mean, you probably remember that there was a lot of shelling on infrastructure, there was a lot of shelling on roads, on schools and things like that, and the Minister needed really to have money to repair things very, very quickly. And that was, we responded in 2-3 weeks with this package of 670 million, and that was the first thing we did. And then we have also continued to disburse. 350 million went really to, that was in September, October last year, 350 million to municipalities to repair buildings, to repair housing for the winter coming up. And there was 650 million for transport and 50 million for energy at that time. Now we still have something like 540 million that we expect to disburse quite quickly. So that would make a total of about 2.3 billion. Now, so I say we try to find an initiative before we can get the guarantee back from the Commission. And that has three legs. The first one is the bank has to commit to provide 1 billion on own risk. That's something we don't do in general outside of the EU, but for Ukraine we think it's important to do. So that's 1 billion of own funds of the bank at risk for Ukraine. We have put from the budget of the bank 100 million for technical assistance, and that is to rebuild, to improve the capacity of rebuilding Ukraine, and that is kind of technical assistance we will provide. And the last leg we need, and that's an important one, and maybe as members of the Parliament you've heard about that, we try to establish a fund. We target the size of something like 1 billion, and that would be with the support of the EU and some like-it countries, maybe Norway, maybe Switzerland, Japan. And we need this 1 billion because otherwise we cannot give the concessional loan that is needed by Ukraine, that I explained before. If we don't have that, we will not be able to deploy the 1 billion of own funds. So we are trying to set up today a fund of 1 billion. Italy was the first one to commit 100 million to that fund. They did that 2 weeks ago in Rome. So that was the first step, but we have also other countries looking into how they can do that very quickly and efficient way. Now, just to explain what we have done, and that's the past, and now what kind of project we are looking at. We have concrete programs for about 2 billion that we are discussing with the government today. And the first one is obviously transport infrastructure. That will be key if you want to develop the country again. Transport infrastructure will be key. Then we have something that we call solitary lanes. That is key. That's very much border points. How we can ensure that Ukraine can export and import the goods at the different borders with the EU, Poland, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Hungary. So we try to develop this transition point at the borders. And then obviously the energy sector is very key. The winter is coming again back to Ukraine in October, November, so we have to be sure that they have all the energy they need. Then municipal infrastructure, I said before, if you want people to stay in Ukraine, to come back to Ukraine, we have to develop this municipal infrastructure that we're working on. And finally, we're also looking into how we can support the digital infrastructure and the cybersecurity of the country. And you can absolutely understand by yourself why that's so important today. And then also the private sector. We think it's important that we also start to focus already today on the private sector. The first one, which is really important, are the SMEs. The SMEs are very powerful in Ukraine. I mean, there are a lot of SMEs in Ukraine, very dynamic, working very well, very much in the IT sector. There are many startups. And they need to have support. What we try to do is to give some kind of guarantee. That's something we work again with the Commission. We can try to guarantee the balance sheet of certain banks, which will allow this to give better loans to the SMEs. You have, in Ukraine, most of the SMEs have no collateral today, so the banks need to have some kind of support. And then we also try to work on the larger corporates, and we see if we can find a solution for kind of war guarantee. It could be partial, but I think we still be good if we can find a solution to give some kind of war guarantee for the larger companies. And also finally, we are looking at what we can do also kind of equity to private funds, and that would be important. You can do a lot in Ukraine with small amount of money. As I said before, you have a lot of very good SMEs, but they need a little bit of own funds, they need a bit of capital. But if you give this capital, the banks will come in with lending. So that is an important part also of what we should do. And then finally, we think that the bank has all the experience to do what we need to do. So we have a kind of intermediary solution today on what we will do. Then we expect to have a solution with the Commission, and that will also help us to build the future of Ukraine as a member of the European Union. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Eric. We have now 45 that have asked for the floor. We need to end this session at 12:30. Her Royal Highness is leaving, though. So I'm going to open the floor to 12:29, and then the panel is going to end after that Her Royal Highness have left this chamber. With that, so restrain, my friends, restrain. We start with the first country, Moldova, very much on our mind as well. Doina German, please.
Your Royal Highness, colleagues and dear friends, today my country, Moldova, is in fact the most vulnerable neighbor of Ukraine. This unjust war has led to significant security challenges and has provoked multiple and unparalleled crises for us too, in the humanitarian, economic and energy sectors. The level of Russian propaganda has reached its peak in Moldova. We are facing now hybrid and direct attempts to destabilize the reform process and challenge the democratic rule. Despite all this, in the past year, we have successfully diversified our sources of gas and electricity through our interconnections with Romania and the European Union, and we are deeply grateful for this. For the first time in our history, the right bank of River Nistru does not use Russian gas at all. Amidst all the challenges, we are still optimistically looking ahead, and there is hope. We have become a candidate state for EU membership last June. In this past year, we have shown that we can cope with extremely serious crisis situation, that we stand in solidarity, and that we are united in our desire to maintain peace, freedom, and our European path. When I am asked what Moldova can be helped with, my answer is, help Ukraine first. My appeal to all of you is, do not uncouple Moldova from Ukraine in your thoughts, words, or deeds. A safe Ukraine is a safe Moldova and a safe Europe. And we will continue to support our neighbors and friends until Ukraine wins. Dear friends, European Union was thought as an entity to ensure peace. It was built on this fundamental principle and has overpassed many difficult situations. We are confident that today, due to its values and long-striving goal to achieve prosperity, victory will prevail, and we, along with Ukraine, will be part of a new and stronger Europe. We are Europeans. Moldova is Europe. Moldova's place is in the European Union. Help us, please, to remain part of the free and democratic world. Thank you.
Pierre-Alexandre Anglade, France, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you very much, Chair. Your Royal Highness, yesterday, President Zelensky rounded off a trip around Europe. He spoke about the needs of his country, the capacity needs. Since the beginning of this war, in fact, our strategy has been crystal clear. We support Ukraine, we help resistance in Ukraine, and we are sanctioning Russia. We want to weaken it in its war efforts. And we are, therefore, also present when it comes to the counter-offensive. It's being prepared right now. It's absolutely essential for Ukraine to regain its sovereignty, its territorial integrity, victory and peace, under conditions that will be determined by Ukraine itself, of course. Discussions have been held with President Zelensky in various European countries, and France, Germany, and other countries too have committed themselves to further help. Tanks, munition, etc. Anything that will help Ukraine lead its counteroffensive. And we also talked about the training of Ukrainian fighter pilots. We think that this is a very essential step. It's the kind of support that we should be providing to Ukraine, again, with a view to the counteroffensive being prepared right now. And also when it comes to the delivery, as soon as possible, of a number of fighter jets to Ukraine, to make sure that Ukraine can actually control its own airspace. So, Mrs. Blunken, you're absolutely right. We do not suffer from fatigue. On the contrary, we continue to support, to stand by Ukraine until victory and peace is achieved. Thank you.
Mark Demaske, Belgique.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, colleagues, friends from Ukraine. I will speak in Dutch. De massale raket.
The missile and drone attacks last night showed us once again how important our military support to Ukraine is. It saves lives. The Ukrainian president has been visiting some of the capitals of the EU and also the UK, and he has been promised additional military support. All that is excellent, but we need to be realistic. We can't just keep giving piecemeal assistance, possibly a little bit late in the day, because we've got to ensure that we do more than simply enable Ukraine not to lose the war. We've seen this with the long-distance artillery, with the tanks eventually, but a bit late in the day, we do come up with the goods, but we really do need to speed up our operation. There is blackmail on a huge scale from Putin, and we've got to realize that the same applies now to the fighter jets. We need to supply these fighter jets. The Belgian government is very keen that we have a proper policy on this, and we want to provide the adequate support which Ukraine wants. We also want to ensure that the confiscated and frozen assets can be deployed for reconstruction effectively. The 11th sanctions package is actually largely tackling circumvention of sanctions, and this builds on a report that was recently published. Official statistics from Kazakhstan show that the authorities there have actually given extensive support to Russia in terms of evading precisely the sanctions that we have been trying to impose. This has enabled re-exportation of quite a number of products, and therefore the secondary sanctions issue has to be addressed. Since we're here in Stockholm, I'd like to conclude paraphrasing Wilhelm Moberg, who's a very famous writer who wrote during the Second World War about Right as Night.
Belong to the free man and to no one else. Slava Ukraini!
Maria Jofevra Skuratowski-Estavabarik.
Your Royal Highness, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, it's of utmost importance that the European Union continues to fully support Ukraine until Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are restored within internationally recognized borders. The EU must continue to emphasize that it is Ukraine who decides on the peace negotiations. Estonia is a firm believer that the political and military leadership of Russia, which has initiated the war of aggression against Ukraine, should be brought to the justice. For this purpose, a special tribunal with an international mandate must be established. It's our duty to make sure that the EU plays a leading role in this. We as politicians have a responsibility to make sure that the West stays united and will not let the war fatigue to take roots. Ukraine needs all its allies to stay true to the goal and help Ukraine restore its territorial integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, another integral part of the EU's long-term support for Ukraine is about encouraging Ukraine's progress towards EU integration and NATO membership. It's the only way to ensure the rule-based world order, lasting peace and the security of the democratic countries of Europe. Thank you for attention.
Maka Bochurshvili, Georgia.
My warm greetings to Her Royal Highness, the Crown Princess Victoria. Dear colleagues, more than 1 year has passed since Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, and to this day it continues to challenge whole European security. Let me once again reiterate Georgia's firm and irreversible support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. War in Ukraine is continuation of Russia's persistent aggressive policy in our region. Georgia feels and understands very well the pain of Ukrainian people and stands in full solidarity with the brave Ukrainian nation in this fight. We have experienced aggression numerous times that resulted in occupation, continuous illegal military presence, and forceful displacement of hundreds of thousands of people from their homes. In this current geopolitical situation, vulnerability is increased, and risks of possible military escalation is even higher. While we are not protected by NATO security umbrella and we are not enjoying EU's economic solidarity yet. However, our support to Ukraine is steadfast. Georgian government ensures full compliance with EU sanctions. We stay in close coordination with relevant EU institutions and other states exercising control on its enforcement. Strong political support is vital to win this fight. Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia applied for EU membership, and we need to secure our European path together with EU and your resolute decisions on granting candidate status to Georgia and launching negotiations with all candidate countries to make this process of European integration irreversible. Thank you.
Andrei Kolar, Czech Republic.
Your Royal Highness, dear colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Ukraine for being a great example to all of us in the past years, a great example of resistance, resilience, and fight for all the freedoms that we all cherish. This is very necessary for us. And I would also like to thank everyone for helping Ukraine. It is crucial to prevail, not to give up, and to remain in what we are doing, because Ukraine needs our help. The Czech Republic was among the first states to help Ukraine not only militarily but also morally when our Prime Minister, together with his Slovenian and Polish colleagues, visited Kiev shortly after Ukraine was invaded last year. I think this is very important because moral integrity and moral support is something that Ukraine needs as well. I would like to ask all of you, there was one point that Ivana mentioned here. Please encourage your municipal colleagues on the municipal level to actively find partners in Ukraine to help to rebuild Ukrainian infrastructure such as schools and all the critical infrastructure that has been struck in the past year by Russian attacks. We are speaking about Russian assets here and the importance of seizing them and using them to rebuild Ukraine. I think there is one more thing that we should think about, and this is Russian property, especially in Central and Eastern European states. Russia holds a great number of property which is being used for hybrid warfare against us, against Europe, which is being used for espionage. And I would like to ask and urge all of you to find a way how to get Russia rid of this property and how to get Russia rid of this influence that they keep and hold in Europe. Once we find a way how to get our hands back on this property and how to get Russia away from it, I think it will be a good way to show, again, a great support to Ukraine and to tackle the massive hybrid threats that are being posed to us from Russia. Thank you very much.
Richard Kols, Latvia.
Your Royal Highness, Mr. Chair, I've been asked time again and again, is West providing enough support to Ukraine? And I have to say, while Ukrainians are showing bravery in face of Russia's aggression, I have to say that it's rather fear than the courage that dominates among the Western leaders. The fear of escalation, the fear of having fully Ukraine into European family, the fear of Russia's defeat, the fear of Ukraine's defeat. These four fears are actually the ones that resonate among the European member states. Those fears are the ones that are hampering action and undermining unity. And I wish eternal shame to those who are undermining unity in Europe. I guess we know whom we're talking about. And I also would like to say that clearly the strategy on how to be victorious on a battlefield or to have a long-term peace in Euro-Atlantic area, we're lacking. To use the terms of former Secretary General of NATO, Rasmussen, we have the approach of step by step. We look, slowly react on a safe side. But with this, I think I want to convey a message to all of us by quoting the two-time Nobel Prize laureate, Marie Curie. There is nothing in life to be feared. It is only to be understood. It is time to be more understood so we can fear less. So I encourage everyone and all of you to get rid of those four fears and to provide all the support that is needed to Ukraine. Thank you.
Eva Maria Holzleitner, Austria.
Thank you, Chair, Your Royal Highness, dear colleagues. Erst kürzlich wurde ein sehr wichtiger
An important step was taken recently in the EU regarding the Istanbul Convention. We joined, and at the same time we're seeing some quite dramatic things happening when it comes to the rights of women, children, human rights. They are the victims of conflict and, of course, of this war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine. They are abused. Women are being raped. And sexual violence is being used as a weapon of war, deliberately so, just as in the past. You also have children who are being deported to Russia. That is why, as EU member states, it is our duty to make sure that we investigate these war crimes. At the same time, within the countries of the European Union, we need to look towards our own countries and make sure that women's rights are expanded in practical terms. Any woman who has been persecuted must receive the necessary support. Also, when it comes to termination of pregnancy, that is a right that should be made available to all women if they need it. Thank you.
Salvatore Caiata, Italy.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Colleagues, Royal Highness, we are history. We sit around this table in front of this podium. We straddle two different eras, and we need to answer urgently the question, where is Europe? We need to find what Europe currently is. We need to find our future strategy, because Europe has got to be right at the heart of our commitment. And for Italy, we are, of course, a founding member of the European Central Initiative, and therefore we need to deploy this for Ukraine, for Moldova, who await impatiently a future where they and the Western Balkans can be part of Europe, where we can change the current borders for a more stable border which will reinforce the stability of the entire continent. This is why we need to drive forward the process of integration, and we need to work tirelessly for a more sustainable and stronger, better future. Italy, as I say, a founding member of the Central European Initiative, is committed to doing its utmost. We're a country which has this in our very DNA. We are committed to enlargement, and we are committed to the Central European Initiative. We know which side of history we want to stand on. We don't want to see anybody delaying. We don't want to see war fatigue. The time for war is past. We need to redefine the frontiers of Europe. Peace must be our sole and predominant objective. As Mother Teresa said, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. It is now high time that we focus on defending this principle, strengthening and defending it from any aggressor. Thank you.
Günther Krischbaum, Germany.
Königliche
Your Royal Highness, Chairman, dear colleagues, I think we all agree in saying that both today and tomorrow we will be calling for more solidarity with Ukraine. We all agree. But what does solidarity mean? Does it mean that we, when it comes to Ukraine, will actually facilitate the export of agricultural produce from Ukraine to the European Union, rapeseed, sunflower seeds, etc., to the detriment perhaps of our own farmers, and to do that with the support of the European Commission? Does it mean that kind of support? Does it also mean that we should support Ukrainian produce being marketed in our member states, Hungary, Germany, etc.? Also, when it comes to sanctions, what does solidarity mean when it comes to sanctions? My colleague, Mr. Demesmaeker, spoke about this. These are being undermined. Look at Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Tajikistan. Look at what's happening there. Look at the foreign trade, external trade, which is exploding right now, because actually these countries are transit countries for produce going, or products going to Russia, drones, etc., circumventing the sanctions. That is where our responsibility starts. We need to curb this. We need to make sure that we have clauses in our trade agreements with these countries. We need to make sure that we can respond with the companies concerned. That is something that is perfectly within our power. We can do that, and that is what I would understand by solidarity with Ukraine.
Logi Einarsson, Iceland.
Your Royal Highness, Chair and dear colleagues, as we gather here today to discuss Putin's terrible war against Ukraine, the fourth Council of Europe Summit is being held in Reykjavik under Iceland's presidency of the Council of Europe. At the summit, heads of state and government from all 46 member states will reaffirm their common commitment to our shared values. The summit presents a historical opportunity to refocus on Council's mission in light of new threats to democracy human rights and to further support for Ukraine. Support and solidarity with Ukraine is one of the priorities of Iceland's presidency, and we anticipate clear conclusions from the summit, including the establishment of a register for damages held to Russia accountable. I want to stress that Iceland remains steadfast in its support and solidarity with Ukraine, and we will continue to fully align ourselves with EU sanctions against Russia. We must remember that it's only Russia that can and must stop the war, and that Putin's aggressive war poses a direct threat to our common value. Dear colleagues, let's stand united in protecting these great values.
Ana Maria Catauta, Romania.
Thank you so much, Chairman, Your Royal Highness, dear colleagues. Indeed, we will all stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. We will also stand with Moldova and with Georgia on their European path. At least my country, Romania, will do so. We have spoken here about the reconstruction of Ukraine, and it's going to be a very, very difficult process. Not only obtaining the money necessary for the reconstruction of Ukraine and prioritizing those issues that need to come first, but also on behalf of Ukraine, it's not going to be an easy process because some reforms are necessary and some things need to be done in order to, let's say, strengthen this common trust among us. And also, let me join my colleague from Austria in saying that we do need to pay a very special attention to women in Ukraine during the war, but also women in Ukraine during the reconstruction process, because they have been through a lot, but also in terms of the economics and numbers, things were proven that when women are involved in the economic process, prosperity has a better chance to occur. Thank you so much.
Nathan Albahari, Serbia.
Your Royal Highness, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this interesting and informative discussion. When we met in Prague last year, I spoke about the need and urgency for our Parliament to address the issue regarding Serbia's alignment with the EU on Ukraine. Yes, we have voted in favor of all UN resolutions condemning the unprovoked Russian aggression and invasion of Ukraine. But unfortunately, we are still behind in demonstrating our complete solidarity and partnership with our Ukrainian and European friends. It is not enough. This must change, and I'm confident it will. We will continue to fight in Parliament to gain majority support for this much-needed policy shift. It is not easy to break away from the Russian hold and influence, but we must. Together, with the help of the European Union, we must be resilient and stand shoulder to shoulder with our European and Euro-Atlantic allies, because only together we are stronger. Help us achieve this goal together and keep the door of Europe open to Serbia. Serbia's place is here in the European Union as a true friend and partner, and we will never give up that fight. Thank you.
Andrius Kubilius, European Parliament.
Your Royal Highness, dear Chair, dear Ivana, dear colleagues, when we are talking about Ukraine, we need to talk about much broader and longer-term issues than just a military victory, which I am absolutely sure Ukraine will achieve very soon. We need to talk about sustainable peace on the European continent, for which Ukrainian victory is most important, but just one of the preconditions. In order to establish sustainable peace, it's not enough of ceasefire or Minsk III-type peace agreements. It's opposite. This is a way for era of permanent aggressions from the side of authoritarian Russia. The only way for sustainable peace on the European continent, democracy spread into Russia and Belarus. Because only democracies are not fighting each other. In order to achieve such a geopolitical reconstruction of the region, first, Ukraine needs to defeat Russia. It will be the defeat of Russian imperial dream. Second, international tribunal needs to be established. Russian people need to see what terrible crimes were made in the name of their imperial dream. Third, Ukraine needs to become a member of NATO immediately after the war, with invitation to join NATO during forthcoming Vilnius summit. Russian people need to get a message that Ukraine is gone, is in the West, not in some kind of grey zone as it was till now. And fourth, Ukraine and Moldova needs to become members of EU till 2029, with negotiations started this year. This, together with post-war reconstruction, is the only way how the success of Ukraine and Moldova after the war can be created. It will become also an inspiration for Russian people to go for the same transformation of their countries. Such is the only possible agenda for sustainable peace, which is needed for all of us. Thank you very much, and Slava Ukraini.
Claude Kern, France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Your Royal Highness. Each day for over a year, Russian bombings have caused innocent victims and caused unmentionable destruction. The European Union and its member states have united in solidarity and have taken every effort on the financial, humanitarian planes to support the Ukrainian authorities and people. France has contributed significant and multidimensional support to Ukraine. The Senate has adopted 2 resolutions supporting Ukraine. The first, on the 7th of February 2023, stresses particularly the need to fight impunity and to prosecute all the perpetrators of crimes committed by Russian forces on Ukrainian territory. The second, on the 17th of April 2023, denounces the deportation of Ukrainian children by Russian forces. We must put an end to these heinous crimes, this documented genocide, and apply strong sanctions to the perpetrators and their accomplices. The European Union can contribute decisively to this. We cannot have peace without justice. The Senate has concluded a cooperation protocol with the Rada to follow up the Ukrainian accession process to the European Union and to transfer knowledge and share good practices. We are fully committed to implementing this protocol and for it to bear fruit in favor of democracy and Ukrainian integration into the European Union. Slava Ukraina.
Sylvester Tulayev, Poland.
Wasza Wysokość.
Your Royal Highness, dear colleagues, the only possible acceptable solution to this illegal war of Russia against Ukraine is full victory of Ukraine and its full integrity. The war did not really start 12 months ago. It started in 2014. We strongly believe that our military and political support will contribute to a full victory. However, let us bear in mind that it is only Ukraine that can decide on the terms of peace in the future. So our priority is ensuring weapons and ensuring continuous supply of weapons. Therefore, I encourage everyone to be courageous in our bold support. Ukraine is a country that can ensure stability in our neighborhood. Ukraine undoubtedly has made substantial efforts. And in spite of the conflict raging in Ukraine, a lot of reforms have been implemented, reforms that the European Commission insisted on. Poland supports Ukrainian aspirations. We support all candidate countries in their efforts, and we are ready to stand in solidarity with those countries. We're talking here about the 11th sanctions package, but let us remember that it is extremely important we should counteract circumventing sanctions. We should make sure that those sanctions are safeguarded. As an international community, we cannot allow a situation where representatives of Russia, of aggressive country, actually take part in Olympics, for example, in international events. The international community should oppose this. They cannot be allowed to attend because they are representatives of an aggressor. Thank you.
Radil Murkanaita Mikulnienie, Lithuania.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness.
30 years ago, the king and the queen were visiting my small town, Rumšiškės in Lithuania. I recall it as a child, and it was a great event for all of our community. Dear Europeans, last week we all celebrated European Day. We would have celebrated it differently if not the war that Russia made. EU was built up for peace, but we all see now the fragility of it. 32 years ago, Sweden stood with us, Lithuanians, Baltics. Your society literally stood on the streets of Stockholm for 79 Mondays. You stand today with Ukraine, we do it too. We don't know how many more Mondays we will have to come to those meetings. Yesterday it was the 56th. One thing is clear, we have to stand firm against Russia, not to repeat naivete that was in 2008 in Sakartvelo, 2014 in Ukraine. If not stopped, Russia definitely will go further. In my country, each generation has experienced constant aggression from Russia. They carried out brutal crimes against humanity. They were deporting our children to Siberia. They done it in Baltic states, in Poland, in Czech Republic, even in Hungary. And they do it now in Ukraine. There were many politicians that didn't support our membership in the EU, but we proved to be good Europeans. Ukraine is proving it now. Let's continue supporting Ukraine militarily. Let's find a way how to use frozen Russia's assets. Sanctions, let's include in them Rosatom. Let's have sanctions on Iran. Accountability. ICC is not enough. Special tribunal is needed. But let's not repeat mistakes with Russia. Let's prevent this continent from sorrow and pain. Thank you very much.
Arber Ademi, North Macedonia.
Your Royal Highness, Princess Victoria, dear colleagues, North Macedonia finds the unjustified aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine to be a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, the fundamental principles of international law, and above all, of the values of humanity. We should keep Ukraine high on our agenda in both global and regional context. The allies must remain united and in solidarity with Ukraine. The Ukrainians are defending their country and people, but are also championing European values, being the first line of defense against Russia. We support the establishment of a special tribunal tasked with investigating and prosecuting all crimes of aggression committed by Russia against Ukraine. North Macedonia supports the advancement of political cooperation between NATO and Ukraine at the highest political level. We support the Ukrainian aspiration to join NATO. Working together, shoulder to shoulder, with our international partners, we will do everything within our power for Ukraine to succeed, for international law to be adhered to, and for the peace and territorial integrity of Ukraine to be restored within its internationally recognized borders. Thank you for your attention.
Gerten van Goitzenhofen, Belgique.
Votre Altesse Royale, chers collègues, rappelons.
Your Royal Highness, colleagues, let me reiterate, if there were needed, of course, we call for unconditional withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine, which includes Crimea back to the pre-2014 borders. Our union has got to stand up tirelessly for our Ukrainian friends, and we need to pursue each and every initiative we can at EU level to support them. This is absolutely indispensable. Moreover, equally indispensable is the fact that the member states must look at their financial and logistical support arrangements, which can be channeled through the International Criminal Court, so that war criminals can be held to account for the barbarous atrocities that have been committed in Ukraine in this war. The hour for reconstruction will come in due course, and the members need to come together to channel their contributions into the appropriate structures. And the members of national parliaments have got a very weighty responsibility in ensuring that this is all done effectively. Slava Ukraina. Thank you.
Brandstetter, Austria.
Your Royal Highness, dear colleagues, I have 3 messages for you. The first is, please go to Ukraine. As chairman of the Austrian-Ukrainian Parliamentary Friendship Group, we have been during the war a few times there. It's very important for our colleagues there to show solidarity, but it's also important for the public there to know that they are not forgotten, that we are on their side. And you learn a lot. First of all, you see this terrible destruction, and it's really incredible. We've been to Bucha, to Kharkiv, to different cities, and it's terrible to see these destroyed schools, hospitals, houses, etc. But on the other hand, you also feel the spirit of these people. These incredible people, they want to survive. No, they want to win, and they are fighting also for us. So please go there. It's a night in the train, but it's not that bad, and it's very well organized. Second thing is, yes, Austria is a neutral country, but the majority in the parliament and also in the public supports what we are doing for Ukraine, and we're doing a lot as far as humanitarian help is concerned. There are different NGOs. One is Pharmacists Without Borders, and they take a lot of medicine there and medical products there also, and you talked about it, friendships between cities in Austria, cities in Ukraine, and we will continue doing that. And of course, we support everything the European Union is doing there. I'm also in favor of helping as far as searching for mines, but that's something which we are still discussing also in the Parliament. And my third message is, I think we have to prepare our people at home that the war will continue. Because, of course, we know Putin probably at a certain point will say, let's stop the war. But what will he do? He will just continue and fight again as soon as he prepares his military again. So I think we have to prepare our people and tell them it will last longer, and at the end there's only one way that Ukraine wins. And last thing, yes, of course, our friends in Moldova, I've been there and I know that Putin has his people there. They want to overthrow the government. So I think we have to show our solidarity also with the people in Moldova. And of course, we're in favor that the Balkan countries will form a unified Europe together with us. I think they're also part of Europe, and we do not forget them. Slava Ukraini.
Ruud Kolen, Netherlands.
Mr. Chair, Royal Highness, also in the Netherlands, we of course support Ukraine for the brave attitude towards this brutal aggression from the Russian Federation. And we support in various ways. Militarily, we give lots of military help with other countries, but also economically, morally. And I think it's very important to show that the Netherlands, as all the other countries, show that Europe is united in this respect. Also, of course, the Netherlands, with The Hague as the city of international law, applauds the idea of having a special tribunal for Ukraine. And also the idea that Ukraine and Moldova and other countries want to join the European Union is very important for the Netherlands. Of course, these countries must meet the criteria for access to the European Union. But my plea here today is let's help them to meet these criteria as soon as possible. Give them help, judicial help, next to the reconstruction help, give them judicial help, give help to NGOs in these countries to build up the democracy, to strengthen democracy. They do already a lot of good work in these countries, but the European Union can help them to improve that in order to meet the criteria of accession sooner and as soon as possible. Because if they are in the European Union, that is not only good for those countries, it's good for the European Union, for the stability of the region, and also for defending our common values. So long live a united Europe, long live an enlarged Europe, long live Ukraine.
Mikhail Kaminski, Poland.
This is unfortunately not the first war on the European soil. It's even, unfortunately, not the first war after the 1945. But this is definitely the first war about the European Union. I witnessed all the peaceful Ukrainian revolutions in the last 20 years. All of them were done under the European flag. The only reason why Russia is attacking Ukraine today is the Euro-Atlantic aspirations of this country and of the nation of Ukraine. Putin was ready to accept the formal independence of Belarus, for example, because he is quite sure that Belarusian dictator is sharing his so-called Russian values. The Ukrainian nation is not sharing those values of Ruski Mir. Those people, they want to be a part of European Union, and they are dying for it. So I think that there is our moral obligation to promise and to fulfill this promise to Ukrainian nation to be a part of European Union as soon as possible. I hope that on the other fronts we will win as well. We have to remember about the Belarusian society which is fighting every day against its dictator. And we should remember about our friends who are now imprisoned. We should remember about the great European statesman and great patriot of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, who is now imprisoned. So I hope that our solidarity with Ukraine, with Belarusian people, and with Mikhail Saakashvili will prevail over the dictators. So, Slava Ukraini, Żywe Belarus, Mikhail Saakashvili must be free. Thank you very much.
And the last speaker, Ananases, Sweden.
Your Royal Highness, Mr. Chairman, and dear Europeans, the Russian war is not about Ukraine. It's an attack on Europe, on democracy, on human rights, and on rule of law. But it's the people of Ukraine that is sacrificed to this evil. This is just so unfair. Therefore, it's our duty to continue and expand the support to Ukraine all the time and always, even if our citizens get tired or when the false propaganda of Russia is spread. This is about when, not if, we will win the war. There is actually no alternative. Therefore, we all together and as individual countries have to have a long-term plan for military support where as well needed weapons as a plan of educating soldiers is included. We have to continue and develop a Marshall Plan for both reconstruction and for development and reforms, not at least so that Ukraine in the future can join the EU family. And this civil society, of course, the civil society and businesses must be involved. Finally, I will underline the importance that women are involved in all these processes and all levels at all the way. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. And now, we are now saying thank you to Her Royal Highness to have attended to this COSAC meeting here today in Stockholm. Thank you so much. Please all rise. And now I'm giving the panel the opportunity to conclude, and I'm going to do that in the opposite order. So I start with Jean-Erik, and then Anders and Ivana is going to have the final word. So Jean-Erik, please.
Thank you very much. I think we all agree at this stage that this war is not only about territory. I mean, it's very important that Ukraine regain all square meters of its territory, but this war is about values. It's about democratic values. And as a witness on the ground, I would just say that the support we have to give to Ukraine is urgent. Obviously, from a military point of view, it's urgent, but also the economic support to reconstruct Ukraine is urgent. I mean, it's only when they get this that Ukraine will become sustainable, and that's what we all need, is having a sustainable Ukraine very, very quickly that can defend itself and can also be independent from an economic point of view. So my key message is that all your support, we agree on that, but it is urgent that we do it very, very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Erik II. And then I give the floor to Anders Arnlid for your comments.
Thank you very much. And I can agree on what Jan-Erik just said evidently. Coming back to the work I am chairing in the EU ad hoc working party, it is evident that there are large sums of frozen Russian assets that could and should be used for Ukraine's reconstruction. And I would just finalize by urging you all to be in touch with your government, and to the extent you have the opportunity, encourage them to be forthcoming and results-oriented in the work towards being able to use these frozen assets. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anders. And then I'll give the floor to Mrs. Ivana Klumpus-Titsitsade. And yeah, your comments, I hope you feel the strong support. But your last comments, please.
Thank you, Matilda. Dear colleagues, yes, thank you very much for all the, not only words of support that were sounding today in this hall, but also your actions that are backing those pledges and that those calls to each other. So we are grateful for what has already been done to support Ukraine, but also are very much hoping that these calls will be heard also by your governments, that you'll be backing in your parliaments additional actions with regard to additional assistance, but also with regard to ensuring that we are, as I said, on the same wavelength with regard to what and how we see our common victory. And for that to happen, Russia has to be defeated, Russia has to be isolated, Russia has to be weakened using all the instruments at hand, and Russia has to be punished. And that only that will actually get us to the more prospect of a durable and sustainable peace. And I'm grateful to those comments of our Latvian colleagues who have said that we should not be afraid, and we should actually look in the mirror and answer very honestly to ourselves, are we ready? And we should get the positive answer to that. Rounding up, I also would like to very briefly react to our German colleagues. Solidarity is definitely not supporting Ukrainian exports at the expense and to the detriment of your farmers. But definitely it's not about suddenly blocking the life lane that was established for Ukraine as the only possibility to export its agricultural exports. So I think that if we are talking about solidarity, it is about sitting around the table and finding the real solutions to maybe difficult problems. And we know that you have the experience of doing that within the EU, so we would hope that you would address similar difficult issues as with partners with us, and we are hoping for that as well. And we are all waiting for the oral update of the European Commission on the homework that Ukraine has been doing on the 7 conditions with regard to the candidate status. We hope that that will guide us to how to improve our performance before the actual assessment of the enlargement package will be made by the end of this year, so that we would count on your support in terms of opening the negotiations, accession negotiations before the end of this year, before the European Union will get into another political cycle. And I cannot but support the invitation of our Austrian colleague. Please do come to Ukraine. I appreciate the incredible and unprecedented decision of COSAC for COSAC chairman traveling to Ukraine last September upon our invitation. I'm very grateful for that. But I'm taking this possibility to invite all of you who has not yet come to Ukraine over this period of time, find the possibilities through your parliaments, with your communities, come to Ukraine. You'll be definitely much stronger in your arguments and further support to our country, but to yourselves as well. Thank you.
Well, you can starting to find your headphones, because I'm quite soon going to switch over to Swedish. But thank you to this extremely great panel. The importance of the bank's work in Ukraine, Good luck with your very important work, Anders, and all support with Ukraine. And I hope that you can convey that to the Ukrainian people, Ivana, and to our colleagues in Rada. With that, and also let us remind us, all of us, today, this day, the war have started 1 year and 75 days ago.
And 8 years.
Absolutely. And then you have 2014. Exactly. So extremely important to remember and also to hold on this and to have this continuous support to Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. With that, we're now going over to the last part of the COSAC meeting. Then avsluta.
So, the closing session. Dear colleagues, time has come for us to adopt our contribution and our conclusions from the 69th meeting of COSAC and its plenary formation. Let us start with the draft conclusions. That's the more straightforward document. A first draft conclusion was sent to all delegations on the 28th of April. The deadline for amendments was set for the 5th of May, and then a new draft was sent out to all of you after the Troika meeting on Sunday. No amendments were tabled after that. In the printed version, which is outside in the lobby, there is actually a typo. Under item 3.2, it says COSAC notes that so far 32 out of 39 national parliaments. It should actually be 39. 39 out of 39. I did say that yesterday, and it's actually remarkable. Absolutely everybody supports this. That's the typo. And with that being clarified, I would like to put the question to you. Would anybody like to speak to the conclusions? Anyone requesting the floor? Apparently not. Very well. In that case, can the COSAC plenary meeting adopt the conclusions sent out to all delegations and also available on the desk? Can we adopt the conclusions? You can say yes if you like. Can we adopt them? Say yes?
Fundamentalt stöd för det.
Wonderful. What massive support. Thank you so much. That is thus adopted and decided. Thank you.
Då går vi.
Very well. Let us then move on to the draft contribution. And for the draft contribution, we followed the very same procedure. Allow me to reiterate that the Swedish presidency has tried to make this contribution reasonably concise. We wanted to really focus on the 4 topics that have been addressed during the course of this COSAC meeting. There were other issues that were discussed in Prague, for instance, and that contribution, of course, is still valid. And there'll be other topics addressed in Madrid, and that will be a new contribution. This particular contribution is the contribution from our meeting in Sweden and the meetings we've been having recently. A first draft was sent to all delegations on the 28th of April. Deadline for amendments was set for the 5th of May. The presidency received a number of motions for amendments, and we tried to incorporate as many as possible, whilst at the same time trying to strike the right balance in this text. We didn't want to expand it all too much. We also had a meeting of chairpersons yesterday. It was very constructive. The discussions were very positive. A couple of points were incorporated into the text. Others were not. The majorities were really quite clear, and I could gauge where the support actually lay in the room as chairman of that meeting. So, with that being the case, you now have before you a proposal, a draft contribution. It's 3 pages long. It's been sent out to you by email. You should all have it, and it's also available in a printed form out there. And therefore, I put the question to the COSAC plenary meeting. Would anybody like to take the floor at this juncture? I see Susana Sumelso from Spain.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Spanish delegation will be very happy to receive all our colleagues next semester in Spain. Our first meeting will take place on the 9th and 10th of July. And from the 24th to the 26th of September, we will hold our COSAC plenary. It will be an honor for us to continue to work towards a stronger, more united Europe with more solidarity and, of course, to work for peace in Ukraine. None of my colleagues were able to speak on this last item, but we do want to express to our Ukrainian colleague that she has the full support of our country, and that during the most recent meetings in the US, our president did convey that Spain's support for Ukraine would be unfailing and for as long as necessary. So we hope to see you in the chairperson's meeting in July and in the plenary meeting in September. It will be a pleasure to welcome you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for that. I was actually going to give the Spanish delegation the floor at the end of all this, but thank you. Thank you already for this warm invitation to come to Spain and to attend the meetings you have just listed. Anybody wishing to speak to the draft contribution is my question to the room. If there are no requests for the floor, then allow me to ask you, can the COSAC plenary meeting adopt the draft contribution? And you can say ja in Swedish if you like. I'll put the question again. Can we adopt the contribution? Thank you.
Tack så mycket för...
Thank you very, very much indeed for your constructive work. And thank you also for reaching that consensus. And again, without having to put anything to the vote. That holds true for the meeting of chairpersons, and it also holds true for this plenary meeting. We didn't need to put anything to the vote, which goes to show that we as Europeans can stand united. Final words of conclusion, if I may. My dear colleagues, I would like to thank you all for these 2 days. It's been a very, very rich meeting, a lot of content with a lot of good discussions. We've addressed 4 different topics, and there's been, I think, substance in all of those debates. It's been a great honor, really a great honor to welcome you here in Stockholm. We've had sunshine, we've had rain, we've had clouds, which goes to show that our country is very varied when it comes to the weather. Interesting weather. Also, I would like to note that we had 2 COSAC meetings as well as an informal video conference with Commissioner Johansson. Slowly but surely, we will be withdrawing from our presidency. We have a couple of weeks left, but we very much look forward to handing over, and we will provide all of our support and all of our goodwill to our friends in Spain, our brothers and sisters. They will, of course, hold the presidency for the next 6 months after us. And, of course, we've already heard from Susanna Sumelzo, who has already extended an invitation for us to go to Spain. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be delighted to come to Spain. We look forward to your presidency. Do you wish to add anything else, Susanna, at this point? Do you want to take the floor again, Susanna?
Utmärkt, då känner vi oss alldeles in.
If not, then we are invited, duly invited. Matilda, I turn to my vice chair. Do you wish to add anything?
Tack så jättemycket. Jag kan bara...
Thank you very much indeed. I would just like to support what the chairperson said a moment ago. Maybe a couple of practical points that I need to address. We're going to have lunch very soon, immediately in fact, in the Grand Gallery. And after that, if you so wish, you can visit an exhibition called Experience Europe in the Culture House, Kulturhuset. It's been arranged by the European Parliament representation here in Sweden. I hope you have that you wish to visit the exhibition and that you'll take this opportunity. If so, then we meet on the Riksplan, which is right by the exit, at 3 p.m., 1500 hours. A representative from the Swedish representation to the European Parliament will meet you there and will take you to the Kulturhus to see the exhibition. Also, for those of you who haven't yet collected your gifts, please do so on your way out. It's at the information desk. I also take this opportunity to thank the interpreters for a good job done, and also my warmest thanks to all the staff, all the civil servants, all the people who have been helping us out here, making sure that this conference could be held. I think they actually deserve their own applause in their own right from the whole assembly. So, dear colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance, thank you for being here, and thank you also for contributing so actively to the discussions. Thank you. And it just remains for me to say that, well, I hope that you like the buffet lunch, and I look forward to seeing you again in Madrid. That concludes the plenary meeting of COSAC. Do come back to Sweden. You don't have to wait 14 or 15 years to come to the Riksdag or come to Sweden again. Please come well before then. Don't wait, come well before then. We are an international parliament and our doors are always open. You're always welcome to Sweden. Thank you very much, and that concludes our session. Thank you.